What if the greatest departure in the history of Middle-earth had simply not occurred? What if the beings who were meant to leave had looked at the ship and found, in the looking, a reason to remain? And what if remaining, which feels like love, turned out to be the one form of love the world could not accommodate? Today, on Scholar of the Rings, we put our scholarship and our imagination into answering one of Tolkien's most quietly devastating questions. What if the elves had never left Middle-earth? The date is September 29, Third Age 3021. The Grey Havens Mythland, at the mouth of the Gulf of Lune where the River Lune meets the sea. The morning is cold and exact. This is the word for it, exact. The sky is the specific gray of a late September morning on the western coast. Not overcast, not threatening, not a dramatic sky that announces what is happening beneath it. Simply present, uniform. The gray that is not a color so much as the absence of the intervention of color. A sky that has cleared itself of everything except the essential task of being the sky above the most consequential departure in Third Age history. The water in the harbor is gray-green, choppy in a mild way that salt water is choppy when the tide is doing its ordinary work and nothing extraordinary is interfering with the tide. The smell is brine and wood pitch and the specific cold of a coastal morning in autumn. The smell of a place that has been doing the same thing for a very long time and is doing it again. Círdan built the White Ship. This requires saying because the White Ship is the material product of the longest career in Middle-earth, and the career has been oriented entirely toward this. The building of vessels capable of the crossing, the tending of the way west, the maintenance, in wood and rope and iron and the shipwright's accumulated knowledge of the physical possibility of departure. He began building ships before the sun was made. He has forgotten more about wood than any other craftsman in Middle-earth has ever learned. The White Ship is, by any measurable standard, the finest thing he has ever built. It sits in Mythland Harbor in the gray September morning with the rightness of a thing that has been made exactly for its purpose, and has arrived at the moment of that purpose's fulfillment. Bilbo Baggins sits on a bundle of luggage at the foot of the gangplank, with the abstracted peace of a person who is 131 years old and has spent the last several decades letting go of things, and has become, through practice, very good at it. He has let go of the ring and the shire and the road and most of his memory's sharper edges, and he is holding what remains, which is not much in the way of possessions but is sufficient in the way of self, with the loose, untroubled grip of someone who has learned that the things worth keeping tend to stay without being held tightly. Frodo is there. His face has the quality of a decision that has been made so completely that the making is no longer visible in it. A face not resolved toward departure but become departure, the way water becomes the shape of the vessel it fills. He is not performing readiness. He has arrived at it by a longer road than most, and arrived means arrived, which means the journey's character has fully transferred to the destination, and the destination is the ship, and the ship is west. Gandalf stands at the gangplank's head, white-robed and silver-haired, patient in the way of someone who perceives the morning's architecture before it resolves and understands already what is happening, and understands also that understanding it does not give him the authority to interrupt it. He waits. He has always waited well. Galadriel reaches the gangplank. She puts her hand on the railing. The railing is cold. Círdan builds in hardwood, properly seasoned, and the morning has brought the cold into the grain of it, and she can feel, through her palm, both the cold and the grain, the specific texture of wood that has been made by a hand she knows. She has known Círdan since the First Age. She knows the quality his hands produce in wood by feel alone. She recognizes it now the way you recognize a voice before you see the face. She looks back. Not at anyone. Not at Elrond, who is 4 paces behind her, or at the Mythland harbor with its fishing boats and its quays and the people of the port who have come to witness what they have been told is a great occasion and who are standing at a respectful distance that they would not have known to maintain except that something in the quality of this morning told them to. She looks at the light on the water. The light on the Lune in October is a specific thing. It is not Valinorian light. It is not the light of the 2 trees, the light that Tolkien describes as residing within the eyes of the Calaquendi, the light that comes from having seen something that the sun, made from the last fruit of a destroyed tree, can only imperfectly approximate. It is ordinary morning light on cold water, gray-green and moving, without grandeur, without the quality of revelation. She has been preparing to leave for decades. Preparing to leave means not dwelling on what you are leaving. She has not looked at this light in decades. She looks at it now. The looking takes longer than it should. Elrond, behind her, stops walking. Not because she has stopped, he does not see her stop, cannot see past her, is attending to the gangplank's angle and the morning's chill, and the specific question of whether the step at the bottom is as solid as it was when they inspected it 3 days ago. He stops because something in the morning's atmosphere changes quality, the way the atmosphere changes when a held breath is held a moment too long. He looks at Galadriel's hand on the railing. He looks at the direction of her gaze. He looks at the light on the water that she is looking at. He does not speak. Círdan is at the ship's ropes. He has the forward mooring rope in his hands, the rope that, when cast off, commits the ship to the departure. That is the physical event that makes the leaving irrevocable. That is not the last step, but the first step that cannot be taken back. He has cast off this kind of rope 10,000 times. His hands know the motion before his mind directs it. His hands do not move. He does not look at Galadriel. He does not look at Elrond. He looks at the rope in his hands. The splice at its end, the iron cleat it is wound around, the knot he tied himself at dawn, because a knot you have tied yourself is a knot you know, and knowing your knots in critical moments matters more than any other single fact about rope. He looks at the knot. Frodo boards. He walks up the gangplank with the steady pace of a person going where they are going, and Bilbo is helped up by 2 of Círdan's people, with the patient efficiency of people who have helped old men up gangplanks before. And Gandalf boards and turns at the ship's rail and watches the dock. Galadriel's hand is still on the railing. The railing is cold in her palm. Later, when the accounting is made, when the attempt to reconstruct the morning's decision is made by those who were there, and those who study what those who were there wrote, no one will be able to identify the precise moment of the refusal. Not because it was ambiguous, but because it was not a single moment. It was a duration. A held gaze. A rope not cast. A hand on a railing that did not move forward. The morning continued to be the morning. The light continued to be the light. Galadriel looked at the water, and Elrond stood behind her, and Círdan held the rope, and the white ship waited with the perfect patience of a thing built for waiting, but not built for waiting indefinitely. Frodo watches from the rail. He does not call to them. He understands what is happening before he has the words for it, because he has been paying attention to the quality of silences for long enough to know when a silence is a decision and when it is simply silence. This silence is a decision. Círdan covers the ship later that afternoon, not in the moment, not while the morning is still resolving, not as a declaration. Later, when the elves have walked back along the quay and the Mithlond people have dispersed, and the harbor has returned to its ordinary business, and the white ship is simply a ship that did not sail. He covers it then, with canvas, old and good, built to last. He covers the hull and the deck and the mast, pulling the canvas over each section with the efficient movements of a craftsman who has covered ships in storage before and does not require ceremony for practical acts. He ties the canvas at the mast's base. The mast extends above the canvas line. Its tip remains uncovered, a pale vertical line against the harbor's gray afternoon. A nautical instrument designed for a specific direction, pointing still. West, always west. Reindeer has been a warden of Lothlórien's eastern marches since the Second Age. This is not a distinction that requires elaboration in the way that mortal military service requires elaboration, rank explained, battles enumerated, the career's arc mapped for an audience that needs the context to understand the weight of the service. Reindeer needs no such mapping. He is old in the way that Sylvan elves are old, without the drama of it, without the visible record of it in his face or his posture or the movement of his hands. He is simply present in the specific, dense way of something that has been in the same place for a very long time and has taken on, through duration, the quality of belonging. The quality a tree has when it is old enough that the wood no longer knows the difference between itself and the ground it stands in. He is not famous. He was not at the Council of Elrond. He did not speak with Gandalf or receive the fellowship or fight at the Pelennor or perform any of the deeds by which the Third Age will be remembered in the centuries to come. He stood watch on the Lothlórien borders for 3,000 years, in the specific, unheroic, entirely necessary way that borders are kept by the people who are keeping them rather than by the people who are celebrated for having kept them. He knows the eastern marches the way he knows his own hands. He has read this forest silences for 3,000 years and knows the difference between a silence that is nothing and a silence that is something waiting to be named. This is a morning in Fourth Age 3. 3 years after the ship was covered. 3 years since Nenya's power ended. Not now. Not on that September morning, but earlier, on March 25th of 3019, when the ring went into the fire and the three lost the foundation of their operation simultaneously. Lothlórien has been without its ring for 3 years, and without its lady for 3 years, and is, in the specific, quiet way of things adjusting to the absence of what sustained them, different than it was. Reindeer does not know how different yet. He is beside a pool in the Golden Wood in the early morning, a pool he has used for this purpose for as long as he has been stationed here, fed by the same underground source it has always been fed by, clear in the way of Lothlórien water, which has always had a quality of clarity that water elsewhere does not share. He is brushing his hair with the comb he has carried since the Second Age, bone, very old, the teeth worn slightly at their tips from the accumulated friction of 3,000 years of mornings. He brushes with the automatic attention of a body performing a task it has performed so many times that the task no longer requires the mind's participation, and the mind, released from the task's direction, is attending to the morning. The morning is correct. This is Reindeer's professional assessment, and it is also his personal one. The forest sounds right. The light is coming through the melon canopy at the angle it comes through in early autumn. The pool is clear. The air carries the smell of leaf mold and bark, and the faint metallic undertone of the underground water source. He is attending to these facts the way a sentry attends to the facts of his post, not consciously, not through deliberate inventory, but through the long-conditioned awareness of someone who has been reading this environment for 3,000 years and whose body will register deviation before his mind processes it. He draws the comb through his hair, catches, not the catch of a tangle. He combs his hair every morning. It does not tangle. The catch of something in the comb's teeth that is heavier than it should be, that sits differently in the comb, that resists the stroke's completion with a resistance that is not friction, but weight. He draws the comb through again, catches again, in the same place. He takes the comb from his hair and looks at it. A single hair is caught in the second tooth from the left. It is gray, not the silver-white that Elvish hair sometimes carries. Not the luminous silver of high Elvish hair that has been described across thousands of years of mannish poetry as starlight and moonwater, and a dozen other approximations of a color that is not a mortal color. This is different from that. This is gray in the specific, dull, mineral way of a thing that has lost a quality rather than a thing that was made with that quality as its nature. It is gray the way iron is gray when it has been sitting in damp air. It is gray the way the sky is gray when the color has been taken out of it. He holds the comb up to the morning light coming through the melon. The gray hair is very clear in the light. He can see its entire length, from the root, where it emerged from his scalp with the wrong color already in it, to the tip, where the comb's tooth has caught it. He turns the comb. He turns it again. He is examining this the way he examines everything that deviates from the pattern he has been reading for 3,000 years, with complete attention, without reaching for an interpretation before the observation is complete. He does not have an interpretation. He has never needed one for this. In 3,000 years of standing watch in the eastern marches of Lothlórien, he has never had a gray hair. Neither has anyone else. He does not have the category for it. He searches his memory, which is an Elvish memory, which is not a human memory, which does not blur with distance or lose detail with time, but retains everything with the same fidelity it had in the moment of recording, and finds nothing. No precedent, no account, no warning. In 3,000 years of Elvish life in this wood, no one has ever stood at a pool in the morning and found a gray hair in their comb. He removes it from the tooth carefully. He holds it between his thumb and forefinger. It is one hair. It has no weight worth measuring. It is an anomaly in a system that does not produce anomalies, which makes it the most significant thing he has encountered at this post in 3,000 years. And the significance is not dramatic. It does not arrive with the quality of crisis or revelation. It arrives with the quality of a single wrong note in a long piece of music, heard clearly by someone who knows the piece well enough to know that the note is wrong before they have identified what note it should have been. He is not alone in noticing. This takes weeks to become clear. The Elvish community of Lothlórien does not convene for comparison of experiences in the way that a mortal community might. What it does is quieter and more total. The information circulates through the specific, ambient channel of people who have lived in close proximity for millennia, and have developed through that proximity a sensitivity to each other's states that operates below the threshold of deliberate communication. Reindeer notices the gray hair, and does not mention it. And 3 weeks later he learns that he did not need to. Everywhere in the remaining Elvish realms, in the margins of Lothlórien and in the northern forests along the Anduin and in Rivendell's valley and along the Mithlond shore, the elves are encountering small anomalies. A sleep that extends past its normal duration, not by hours, but by minutes, and the minutes are new. A cut from a branch, taken while descending a Malern at speed, that takes 2 days to close rather than the half-day that such a cut has always taken. A color, the specific silver gold of the Malern bark in morning light, that looks, in certain lights, slightly duller than it has looked for 3,000 years. Not dramatically different. Slightly. The kind of slightly that only someone who has been looking at the same thing for 3,000 years would notice. The world has changed its orientation. It is not hostile. It is simply no longer aligned with them in the way that it was aligned with them when they were what the world was built for. The world is. With the quiet indifference of a thing performing its own natural function, proceeding in the direction of men, proceeding in the direction of the temporal, the mortal, the changing, and the elves, who are none of these things, are discovering what it feels like to be in a world that is not proceeding in your direction. It feels like friction. Faint, consistent, everywhere, Reindeer, standing at his post in the eastern marches of Lothlórien on a morning in FO3, takes a small piece of cloth from his belt pouch. He folds the gray hair into it. He returns the cloth to the pouch. He does not know why he keeps it. He is a practical man. 3,000 years of border work produces a specific relationship to practicality. An intolerance for the unnecessary, a preference for the function over the symbol. He keeps it anyway. He registers, without articulating, that the gray hair is the first thing that has been new in the way that mortal things are new, unrequested, undesigned. A product of the world acting on him rather than he on the world. He keeps it because his body, which has been a reliable instrument for 3,000 years, tells him to keep evidence of the instrument's first anomaly. He returns the comb to his pack. He resumes his patrol. The hair is in the pouch. He will lose the cloth eventually. He knows this, because things in pouches are lost. Because the Fourth Age is a world of lost things. But he will not lose the knowledge of what the hair meant, which is this. The world has stopped meeting him halfway, and the distance that remains is not fixed, and it is going to grow. The first Malern leaf falls on a Tuesday. This is not recorded anywhere in the formal histories of Lothlórien, because Lothlórien does not keep formal histories in the way that men keep formal histories. Does not have a scribal tradition oriented toward the documentation of events in the order of their occurrence, because events in Lothlórien have, for a very long time, not been the kind of events that require this kind of documentation. What happens in Lothlórien happens slowly, deeply, across timescales that make the recording of specific days seem beside the point. The Malern Forest is not a chronicle, it is a condition. It has been a condition since Galadriel brought the melon seeds from Minor and set them in the soil of the Celebrant's banks, and the condition has been, these trees are golden in autumn and silver in winter and full in spring, and they do not fall the way other trees fall, and the leaves do not drop the way other leaves drop. And the forest floor is kept clear and fragrant, and the quality of the light through the canopy is the quality of light through the canopy in Lothlórien, which is not the same quality that light has anywhere else in the world. The condition ended on March 25th to 2019, when the One Ring went into the fire. What fell on a Tuesday in FO30 was the first visible evidence of what that ending produces over 30 years. Galadriel is on her knees in the damp leaf mold when it falls. She is working in the portion of the forest she calls, in her own mind, the center, not geographically central, but the center of what she attends to. The collection of the oldest and tallest Malern that have been here since she first set the seeds, that have had 3,000 years to grow into what Malern become when they are given 3,000 years and the maintenance of a ring of power. They are extraordinary trees. They would be extraordinary by any standard available in the mortal world. Their canopy spread alone would command a scholar's complete attention. She attends to them by hand now, in the specific, limited way that a pair of hands can attend to trees that spent 3,000 years being attended by a ring. She is checking the soil composition around the eldest tree's root exposure. She has a small tool for this, a probe, old brass. Said to have come from the craftsmen of Aragion in the years when the rings of power were being made, though the accounts of her whereabouts in that period are themselves uncertain and disputed. The probe is 8 inches long and takes core samples from compacted soil. She uses it to check moisture, root health, the distribution of the fungi that live in relationship with the Malern root system and without which the trees would not be what they are. She has 20 trees in her current circuit, She tends to them in sequence, spending approximately 2 hours with each, checking, adjusting, adding material where material is needed, removing where removal is needed. She has been doing this for 30 years. 20 trees in her circuit means she gets to each tree once every 40 days, approximately. And in 40 days, a tree that needs attention can accumulate needs that take 2 hours to address. And this is the mathematics of her situation. 20 trees, adequately tended, in a forest of 50,000 trees that need the same tending. She does not address the other 49,980 trees. She does not address them because she cannot, and she does not address that she cannot, because addressing it would require the kind of accounting she is not prepared to do yet. Not yet. She is 30 years into the fourth age, and the losses are still being measured, and the measuring requires proximity to the loss, which is possible only if she has not yet decided whether the loss is total, which she has not yet decided, which means the losses are still being measured, which means she is still on her knees in the soil checking root systems with a probe whose maker's identity is remembered only in fragments. The Tuesday leaf falls from the canopy of the third tree in her circuit. She sees it at the edge of her peripheral vision, a flash of gold going brown in a forest where the leaves have been going gold for 3,000 years without going brown, where gold was the autumn conclusion and the autumn conclusion was maintained indefinitely, where the falling was managed. Was held in the specific, patient suspension of Nenya's influence, was never this, the simple, unmediated physics of a leaf in the later stages of cellular death, releasing its attachment at the point of minimum resistance, dropping through the still air of the Malern forest on a trajectory determined entirely by its weight and the minor variations in the air through which it falls. It lands on her left knee. She looks at it for a long time. It is a Malern leaf, unmistakably, specifically a Malern leaf. The shape is not available in any other tree. The lobed margins and the central rib, and the way the golden color is distributed across the surface in a gradient that has the specific quality of Lothlórien's autumn, which is not autumn as experienced elsewhere. But the color has gone further than gold. The tip of the leaf, the point at the lobe's apex, has achieved a brown that is entirely mortal, entirely temporal. The brown of a cell that has finished its work and released its contents and begun the return to simpler chemistry. She lifts the leaf. She holds it in both hands in the way that you hold things that require more than one hand's worth of attention to properly receive. The veining is perfect. She can see the full vascular system, the main rib and the secondaries and the fine net between them, rendered now in the brown of drying tissue against the gold of tissue still in the process of completing its autumn program. The fall has not harmed it. It is intact. It has simply reached the stage that leaves reach when no ring is maintaining them at the stage before this one. She sets the leaf down on the root exposure of the third tree. She does not put it elsewhere. She does not carry it away as a symbol or a token or evidence. She sets it at the root of the tree it came from and considers what she is looking at, which is the first leaf in the history of Lothlórien to fall without having been invited to fall. She returns to her soil probe. She finishes the third tree's root assessment. She moves to the fourth tree. She works through the remaining 17 trees in her circuit with the same attention she brought to the first 3. She does not think about the leaf while she works, because she is working, and working requires the attention that thinking would occupy, and she has learned, in the very long life that produced the very specific competence she is currently applying, that the things that require thinking can usually wait for the working to be done. At the western edge of Lothlórien, a mullein tree that Galadriel has not yet reached in her circuit is losing light from its bark. This is the technical description of what is happening. The silver-gray luminosity that has characterized mullein bark for as long as mullein have grown in Lothlórien, a luminosity that is not bioluminescence in any biological sense. That is not the reflection of external light. That is something else. Something that Galadriel could have explained in the years when she was daily in conversation with Nenya's operation and understood its effects on the forest's biology from the inside, is diminishing at the margins of the bark's outer surface. The innermost bark is still luminous. The outermost layer is becoming, millimeter by millimeter, ordinary gray. The gray of bark. The gray of bark on a tree that is not being maintained by a ring. The tree is not dying. It will take another century to die, if it dies. It may simply become an ordinary tree, a very large and very old and very beautiful ordinary tree, stripped of the quality that made it specifically a Malern and not simply a tree. It will take many years to determine which. Galadriel does not go to the western margin to check. The oldest trees are at the center of the forest, and she loves them best, and she cannot address everything, and what she does not address, she does not examine. This is not a failure of care. She cares for everything in this forest equally, in the sense that her love makes no distinctions of value. What she cannot do is be equal, in her attention to every object of her love. The hands she has are the hands she has. The probe is 8 inches long. There are 2 of them, a left hand and a right hand, and they are capable of exactly what they are capable of. And the forest is what the forest is, and the margin between these 2 facts is 49,980 trees. She does not go to the western margin. She moves to the 5th tree. She kneels. She begins the assessment. Behind her, at the root of the 3rd tree, the first fallen malern leaf begins, in the quiet and indifferent way of organic material returning to the chemistry it came from, the process of its next stage. No one has told it to stop. Círdan the shipwright has been building ships since before the sun was made. This is not a figure of speech. It is the literal, canonical, verifiable fact of his existence in Tolkien's legendarium, and it must be held precisely because the precision is the point. There is no period in the recorded history of Middle-earth during which Círdan was not building ships, was not oriented toward the sea, was not the keeper of the technical knowledge and the practical capacity that made departure possible. He was here before the First Age began. He was here during it, watching the host of the Noldor sail east to their ruin and intermittent glory. He was here in the Second Age, when the Inmenrians came and went and drowned, and their descendants built kingdoms on the shores of a world they were always going to outlast their welcome in. He was here in the Third Age, building the ships that carried the elves west in the slow, centuries-long process of a people returning home by the only road available to them. He is here now. In FO50, Círdan the shipwright is in his dock shed at Mithlond, in the early morning, with the adze in his hand. This is a normal morning. This is every morning. His hands do not know how to be empty during the working hours of a day, which is to say his hands do not know how to be empty at all. Because his hands have been building things for longer than working hours have been a concept, and the concept of not building is not available to them in the way that certain concepts are unavailable to tools, not through stubbornness, but through the simple fact that the tool was made for its purpose, and the purpose is what the tool knows. The adze is old. It is older than most things that still exist, in the specific accumulated way that a tool becomes old when the same hand has used it for the same purpose for long enough that the hand and the tool have arrived at a mutual adjustment, the handle worn exactly to his grip by centuries of use. The blade ground to an angle that 3,000 years of daily correction have produced as the ideal angle for his specific application of it to wood, of the kind he works. It is one of the finest hand tools in Middle-earth, which is not a sentimental assessment but a technical one. The finest hand tools are the ones that have been most thoroughly calibrated to their purpose by the most extensive experience, and this adze has been calibrated to its purpose by the most experienced shipwright who has ever lived or will ever live. He is looking at a hull. Not his hull, a commission. A delegation from the fishing communities of Mithlond came to him 3 weeks ago with the request, which was framed with the careful courtesy of people who understand that they are asking something of someone whose usual work is substantially larger than what they are asking. They need a fishing vessel, a practical boat, designed to go out onto the Bay of Lune in the early morning and return with what the bay provides, to make this journey repeatedly, to do it in weather and in calm, to be maintained by people whose expertise is fishing rather than building. They need a boat that does its job and comes home. They have asked the best shipwright in Middle-earth to build it, because the best shipwright in Middle-earth is here and available, and the fishing communities know this without fully knowing what it means. He can build it. This does not require documentation. He can build a fishing vessel with the resources he has and the time the commission implies, and the quality that his hands produce automatically. Because the quality his hands produce automatically exceeds what any fishing community could reasonably require by a margin so substantial it is not a margin, but a different category of outcome entirely. He can build a boat that will last 200 years in Bay of Lune conditions. He will build a boat that will last 200 years in Bay of Lune conditions even if he is trying to build a boat that will last 50, because the standard his hands are calibrated to will not permit the lesser outcome. He picks up the adze. He runs his thumb along the blade's edge, the specific gesture of a craftsman checking a tool before committing it to material. A gesture that has a meaning in the body of a craftsman that it does not have in the body of anyone else. The edge is correct. He maintained it yesterday. he maintains it every morning. The maintenance of the tool is not contingent on whether the tool will be used that day, because the maintenance of tools is not conditional on use, it is a practice, and the practice is what keeps the tool ready. And ready is what the tool should always be. He sets the adze down on the workbench. He picks it up. He sets it down. He picks it up. He runs his thumb along the edge again, not because the edge has changed in the interval since he last checked it, because the edge has not changed, because he knows it has not changed, because he would know if it had changed. He runs his thumb along it because his thumb needs something to do while the rest of him is engaged in a decision that has been unresolvable for 3 weeks, which is, what is this boat for? Not functionally. He knows what it is for functionally. It is for fish. It will carry people to where fish are and return those people with fish, and the fish will be eaten and the people will go out again. This is its function, completely, and the function is real, and the function is necessary, and the people who need it genuinely. He is asking a different question, and he knows it and cannot stop asking it, which is the specific quality of questions that the mind has been working on for 3 weeks without resolution. They recur automatically. Past the point where you have decided that the question is settled, past the point where you have told yourself that the answer is obvious and the asking is a waste of time, the question recurs because it is not settled and the answer is not obvious and the asking is not a waste of time. The question is, what are his hands for now? He goes to the covered ship. He does this every day. He has done it every day since he covered it, 50 years ago. The white ship sits in Mithlond Harbor under its canvas, in the specific preserved condition of a thing that has been covered by someone who covers things very well, which means no deterioration, no rot, no salt creep through the covering to the wood beneath. He maintains the canvas. He checks the fittings. He adjusts where the canvas has loosened in the wind and tightens where it has not. He does this with the same attention he brings to every vessel in his care, which is the complete attention of a craftsman who does not make distinctions of purpose when it comes to the maintenance of what he has built. The mast is above the canvas line. It is always above the canvas line. He covered the hull and the deck and the base of the mast, but the mast's upper portion remains exposed, not because the canvas was insufficient to cover it, because the canvas would have covered it, because he made the canvas. The mast is exposed because he has been covering ships in storage for a very long time, and he knows that the mast is the part that needs the least protection and the most visibility, that the mast is what you look for when you are looking for a ship in harbor, that the mast is the instrument of orientation, the tall thing that points, not at its own direction, but at the sky, and the sky is in the direction of sailing, and sailing is the direction of departure. He stands beside the covered ship for the length of time he always stands beside it, which is not a fixed duration and has never been a fixed duration. He puts his hand on the canvas over the hull. The canvas is taut under his hand, correctly maintained, properly tensioned, doing its job. He takes his hand away. He goes back to the dock shed. The adze is on the workbench where he left it. He sits down on the stool he keeps beside the workbench, the stool he has sat on during every period of assessment and preparation in the dock shed's history, which is not a recent history. He looks at the hull timber propped against the opposite wall, 3 long planks of good hardwood, prepared, seasoned, ready for the beginning of the fishing boat's keel. The keel is the first piece. The keel is always the first piece. Everything else organizes itself around the keel, which is why the keel is also the piece that commits you to what you are building. Once the keel is laid, the shape of the eventual vessel is determined by it, and the shape determines the purpose. And the purpose is what the vessel is. He knows what the keel will look like. He has been building keels for longer than anyone else has been building anything, and the keel for a fishing vessel of this specification is a keel he can produce from memory, from muscle memory, from the knowledge so deeply embedded that it is indistinguishable from instinct. His hands know what to do with the adze and the timber. He looks at the adze. Tomorrow, he tells himself. He will begin tomorrow. He has told himself this for 3 weeks, and tomorrow has arrived each time and found him at the workbench with the adze in his hand and the timber against the wall and the keel uncommenced, and he will begin tomorrow, which will arrive and find him here again. Because the question his hands are asking is not resolved by waiting for tomorrow, because the question is not about timing. The question is about direction. He is the best builder of things that cross water in one direction in the history of Middle-earth, and the direction his life's work was calibrated toward is the direction the covered ship is not going. And the adze on the workbench is an instrument of departure being asked to build arrival, and it is a very fine adze, and it has nothing to open. He leaves it on the workbench. He goes to look at the mast above the canvas again, because it is there, because it points where it has always pointed, because some instruments maintain their orientation even when the journey has been declined. And he cannot entirely stop reading the instrument just because the journey is not being taken. The mast is there. It points west. He stands with his hands at his sides, which is the posture his hands take when they have nothing to hold, which has not been their posture in 3,000 years of holding things. He goes home. The adze sits on the workbench in the dock shed, blade correctly angled, edge correctly maintained, ready to open wood that has not been opened. A tool of departure asked to build the ordinary. Sitting on the bench, it is exactly what it has always been. That is the problem. That has always been the problem. Aragorn Elessar has been king for 20 years and has not yet fully inhabited the kingship for a single day of those 20 years. This is not a failure. It must be said at the outset, and held through the chapter, this is not a failure. The assessments available to any external observer of the Fourth Age's first 2 decades are unambiguous. The legal reforms Aragorn has enacted in Gondor's southern provinces represent the most substantive revision of the Enmenraean legal inheritance since the Third Age's founding. His management of the post-war relationship with Harad and Ren, the specific difficult work of turning defeated enemies into something other than resentful subjects, has produced results that Gondor's diplomatic corps did not predict and continues to attribute, with the slightly embarrassed precision of people who have been wrong about something they should have been right about, to the king's personal attention. His military reorganization has been thorough without being extravagant, which is the sign of a commander who understands the difference between the military force a kingdom needs and the military force a kingdom's traditions have accustomed it to maintaining. He has made in 20 years thousands of decisions, and the record of those decisions is the record of a man who is doing everything correctly. The kingdom knows this. The kingdom says so, in the specific way that kingdoms say things, through the accumulation of spoken assessments in markets and council chambers and the letters that travel between the administrative centers of a realm that is, by any measure available to those measuring it, better governed than it has been in centuries. What the kingdom does not say, because the kingdom does not have the vocabulary for it, because the vocabulary for it does not exist in any public register, is that the king is 20 years into his reign and still, in the specific cellular way of a man whose formation took place in a particular house before a particular judge, performing the court of the king. Minas Tirith. FO 20. A morning in early autumn. The delegation is from Ithilien, from the new settlements that Faramir has been building in the recovered lands east of the Anduin, the settlements that are, 20 years into the Fourth Age, beginning to require the kind of administrative attention that settlements require once they are no longer settlements but communities, which is to say, they require resources. And the resources require decisions about where they come from, which is to say, they require a king to attend to them. There are 4 of them. The captain of the Ithilien Rangers, who has administered the eastern territories since the war's end, a woman who represents the new farming communities of North Ithilien, a man from the Emin Arnon estates who has served Faramir's household and is here carrying Faramir's written assessment, and a young architect who has been designing the infrastructure of the new settlements and whose specific request concerns the materials required for a water management system that will determine whether North Ithilien's farming communities are viable for another generation. Aragorn receives them in the court with the full, focused attention that characterizes every audience he grants, the attention of a man who is genuinely present in his own decisions, who does not delegate comprehension, who reads the written assessments before the delegation arrives and retains what he reads and uses it. He has read Faramir's assessment. He has read the architect's specifications. He has formed a view. He presents the view. He is measured, precise, specific in the way of someone who has done the preparatory thinking and is now delivering its results. The water management system will be funded from the royal treasury, in the first instance, against a repayment schedule to be negotiated with the estate holders once the system's productivity figures are established over a 3-year trial. The materials will be sourced from the Lothlórien quarries rather than imported from the north, which reduces the cost by 1/3 and employs Lothlórien labor that is currently underutilized after the war's end. The architect's timeline is optimistic by 2 seasons, which he knows because he has built infrastructure in the field under worse conditions than North Ithilien's current state provides. and the architect's timeline should be revised before the contracts are issued, to avoid the specific damage to everyone's credibility that a missed deadline produces when the missed deadline was predictable. He says this clearly. The delegation listens. The architect takes notes. The captain of the Ithilien Rangers, who has been around long enough to have developed an accurate sense of when a king's decision is definitive and when it is provisional, registers, correctly, that this decision is definitive. And yet, the Faramir assessment on the table in front of Aragorn is marked, in the margin beside a specific passage about timber sourcing, with a small annotation in Aragorn's own hand. The annotation is in Sindarin. It says, in the compressed notation of a private thought that was never intended for other eyes, what would he have done? The he is not identified. It does not need to be identified. In 20 years of private annotations, the unidentified he has been the same person every time. Aragorn did not write the annotation as a doubt. He had already decided, before writing it, what he was going to do about the timber sourcing, and the decision is the decision he presents to the delegation, and it is the correct decision. He wrote it as a check. The check was automatic. It arrived before the decision was fully formed, before the alternatives were fully assessed, before the specific weight of the available evidence had been brought to bear on the specific question of timber. The check arrived because the process of forming a judgment, in Aragorn, has a step that was installed very early in his life and has been present in every judgment he has formed since, which is, run it past the standard. The standard is in Rivendell. The standard has always been in Rivendell. In the Third Age, because that was where Elrond was, and in the Fourth Age, because that is still where Elrond is. Elrond, who is not attending this audience, who has not been asked to attend this audience, who does not know that his foster son is marking assessments in Sindarin margins with automatic reference to the judgment of the man who raised him. Aragorn is a great king. He is doing everything correctly. He annotates the margin with the specific, private, entirely involuntary notation of a man who has been performing toward a standard for so long that the performance has become indistinguishable from the thing itself, except in the margins, where what is written is what is true before the editing. The delegation departs. The court empties in the organized, efficient way of a well-run administrative apparatus redistributing itself after a formal session. Aragorn remains at the table. He looks at Faramir's assessment. He looks at the annotation in the margin. He does not read it again. He does not need to read it again. He knows what it says. He looks at it the way you look at something that you have identified and cannot stop identifying, that you know the name of and wish you did not, because the naming of it changes your relationship to it from something you can pretend is not there to something you are obligated to attend to. He closes the assessment. He straightens the papers on the table with the habit of a man who keeps order. Because order is the external expression of the internal discipline that keeping order requires, and internal discipline, maintained, produces. He has believed this since his foster father taught it to him in Rivendell, the conditions under which correct judgment is possible. In the evening, he writes a letter. He addresses it to Elrond of Rivendell, in care of the Lord's own hall. He writes it in the specific, measured prose of someone who writes carefully, because writing is how they organize their thinking, not because they are trying to perform clarity for the reader. He writes about the Ithilien decision, and his reasoning, and the alternatives he considered, and the conclusion he reached. He writes well. He is a good writer. 60 years of ranger reports and diplomatic correspondence have made him precise and economical, and precision and economy in prose are the signs of a mind that has learned to separate what matters from what surrounds it. He folds the letter. He addresses it. He does not send it. He puts it in the drawer. The drawer is not empty. It has not been empty for years. He does not open the drawer all the way. He does not need to. He knows what is in it. Folded parchment, a stack of it. Each piece addressed in his hand to the same recipient. Each piece containing the specific, organized, carefully expressed version of a conversation that has been ongoing in his head for 20 years and has not been resolved by 20 years of ongoing, which is the nature of conversations that are one-sided. They continue without concluding. Because conclusion requires the other person to speak, and the other person, in this case, is in Rivendell and has not been asked. He closes the drawer. He goes to the window that looks north. On clear nights, he cannot see Rivendell from here. The distance is too great. The geography intervenes. There are too many things between the court of the king and the valley of the Bruinen. But he knows the direction. He has always known the direction. Some knowledge is installed early enough that it operates below the threshold of the deliberate, below the level at which you can choose to apply it or not apply it, below the level of decision. North, 300 miles. The valley between the misty mountains' arms, where the last homely house sits beside the Bruinen, and the house is exactly as it has always been, and Elrond is exactly as he has always been, and the judgment Aragorn has been checking himself against for 20 years is there, available, in the keeping of the man who installed it. The drawer has 20 years of letters in it. He has not sent one. This is not distance. It is not estrangement. It is not even precisely the pride of a king who refuses to defer. It is something smaller and more total, the specific private acknowledgement of a man who knows that the act of sending would confirm what not sending allows him to leave unconfirmed, which is that the standard he has been performing toward is still the external standard, and not yet fully his own. He goes to bed. In the morning he will have audiences and decisions and the ordinary work of a king who is doing everything correctly. The letters will be in the drawer. The drawer will close. The annotation in the Athelian assessment will say what it says. He will write another letter, probably, and not send it. That is the shape of it. That is the complete, unambiguous, entirely private shape of the most successful reign in Gondor's recent history. A great king and a drawer that will not empty, and a standard 300 miles north that was meant to be left behind and was not, because nothing that was meant to be left behind was left behind, and the world that was supposed to have moved on is still. In every direction Aragorn can look, exactly where it was when he arrived in it. Elfield is born in FO 33, in the second house from the eastern road in a settlement that does not yet have a name. The settlement will eventually be called Bruinen Crossing, which is a name produced by the same practical logic that produces most settlement names in the Fourth Age. It describes where the settlement is rather than what it aspires to be, which is the naming convention of people who are too busy building the thing to also imagine a name for it that exceeds the thing's current dimensions. The settlement is on the eastern bank of the Bruinen, south of the Old Ford, in a clearing that Aragorn's resettlement administrators identified as suitable for agriculture based on the soil assessments from the Third Age that were preserved in the Rivendell archives and copied, with Elrond's permission, into the New Kingdom's cartographic records. The settlement is small, 12 families, when Elfhild is born. Her parents are Gondorians, second-generation settlers, which means their parents made the decision to come north, and they inherited the consequences of that decision in the form of this particular piece of land on the eastern bank of the Bruinen, with the Old Ford to the north and the beginning of the Trollshaws to the east and. Visible on clear days from the high ground above the settlement, the roof lines and the thread of chimney smoke of the last homely house across the valley. Elfhild grows up knowing the direction of Rivendell the way she knows the direction of the river. Automatically, because some directions are installed by proximity before you have the capacity to choose whether to attend to them. She does not go to Rivendell. No one in the settlement goes to Rivendell, because Rivendell has not invited them, and the specific quality of Rivendell's presence in the valley, felt rather than explained, known through a quality of the air in certain wind directions rather than through any stated boundary, does not produce in the settlers the impulse to approach. It produces in them the impulse to know where it is. They always know where it is. They do not go there. She is 7 when she sees the elf. It is FO 40. Phase 1 fading, early enough that the elves are entirely physically present, late enough that the world's changed quality has begun to express itself in the body's margins, the slightly shallow footprint, the breath that does not always mist in cold air, the shadow that is occasionally less consistent than a body of that size should produce. Early enough that none of these marginal expressions have accumulated into anything that a casual observer would identify. To a child of 7 on the road beside the Bruinen in the early morning, the elf looks like a woman. She is a healer, one of the Noldor who remained with Elrond in Rivendell, a woman whose specific competence in the management of injuries and illnesses dates from the First Age, and has been refined across the entirety of the subsequent ages into something that transcends the word expertise in the direction of constitutive identity. She heals the way Corden builds ships, not as a profession adopted, but as a nature expressed. She is on the road toward the Bruinen Ford in the early morning because there is a settlement on the eastern bank, and settlements have people in them, and people have injuries and illnesses, and she is someone who addresses injuries and illnesses. She did not announce her coming. She simply came, the way healers who have been healing for 6,000 years come to places where healing is needed, without ceremony, with all the necessary materials, in the early morning before the day has gotten complicated. Elfhild is on the road because she is 7, and the road is there, and the morning is fine, and she was supposed to be getting water from the stream and has become distracted by the specific, powerful distraction of an interesting morning and a road going in a direction she has not gone before. They meet at the bend in the road where the Bruinen's bank curves and the willows overhang the path. The elf woman walks around the bend and stops. Elfhild walks around the bend from the other direction and stops. They are 10 feet apart in the morning light under the willow branches. The elf woman is entirely physically present. She has a pack, a healer's pack, organized with the specific, recognizable logic of medical supplies arranged for rapid access rather than aesthetic preference. She has a walking staff, ash, plain, serviceable. She has the elf's face, which is not human in the way that a very beautiful human face is not quite human. The proportions slightly off from the norm in the direction of more. The eyes carrying the specific quality of eyes that have been open for 6,000 years and have not missed much of what passed in front of them. She stands in the morning light and looks at Elfhild with complete attention. Elfhild looks back. 7 years old is the age at which the capacity for classification is substantially developed, but the inhibition of classification is not. A child of 7 looks at what is in front of her and registers it fully, without the social editing that an adult applies to experiences that exceed their category system. Elfhild looks at the elf woman and does not say this is too large for my categories the way an adult would. She simply looks. The looking is full and complete, and she receives everything that is there to receive, which is a woman who is not entirely the same species as the women she knows, who has a quality of presence that is different from the qualities of presence she has encountered before. This is the specific unarticulatable perception that Elfhild will spend years trying to find words for, other in a way that is not threatening and is not warm in the ordinary sense, but is present, completely and specifically, as a quality rather than a quantity. Neither of them speaks. The elf woman holds Elfhild's gaze for a moment. Something in the gaze shifts, not in the elf's eyes, which do not shift the way mortal eyes shift, but in the quality of the attention behind them, which moves from assessment to recognition to something that Elfhild, at 7, receives as the specific sensation of having been seen by something that sees more than she knows is there to be seen. Then the elf woman continues on the road. She goes around Elfhild, and her footfalls on the path are quiet in the way that footfalls in early morning are quiet, and are also, slightly, quieter than that. The willows move in the wake of her passage. Elfhild turns to watch her go. The elf woman does not look back. Elfhild gets the water from the stream. She returns to the settlement. She does her morning tasks. She eats her breakfast. She does not tell anyone about the woman on the road, not because she has decided not to. She has not decided anything. She is 7. But because the encounter exists in a register that the settlement's morning conversation does not obviously accommodate, and accommodation requires a bridge between registers. And she does not have the bridge yet. She will spend years building it. She will not fully build it. Some gaps between registers cannot be fully bridged by building in one direction. They require building from both sides simultaneously, and the elf woman on the road has not been consulted about the construction. But the foundation is there now. The foundation is the 10 feet of morning road under the willows, and the 2 pairs of eyes across it. And the quality of what passed between them, which was not communication and was not its absence, but was something that includes both and is described by neither. Elfhild has been looked at by something that knows more than she does about what she is and what the world is, and what the relationship between the two will eventually become, and the looking has registered. And the registration will shape every subsequent encounter she has with the elvish presence in her childhood landscape, and the encounters will be the spine of her development as a person, and the person she becomes will be the person who understands what the rest of her community is still learning. She does not know any of this at 7. She knows the road, the willows, the woman, the looking. She grows up. The high ground above the settlement is accessible by a path that climbs the eastern bank and emerges on a promontory above the Bruinen's valley. From the promontory on clear days, Rivendell is visible across the valley floor, the roof lines, the chimney smoke, the particular way the valley's architecture integrates with the valley's topography in the manner of something that has been in place long enough to become indistinguishable from the place itself. Elfhild, at 7, has carried her water back and finished her morning tasks and eaten her breakfast. She is at the promontory now, which was not her assigned location for the morning. But she is 7, and assignment and location are concepts that require sustained attention to maintain, which she has not always. she has an apple. The settlement's orchard is young, planted in the second year of the settlement's existence, which means the trees are still in their early productivity, still producing apples that are slightly smaller than they will eventually be, slightly more tart, with the specific intensity of flavor that young trees produce when they are still directing energy toward establishment rather than abundance. She eats it with the straightforward attention of a 7-year-old who is hungry and has an apple, which is the whole of the apple's significance to her at this moment. She looks at Rivendell. The smoke is rising from the chimneys. She can see it clearly from here, a pale thread against the morning sky, indicating habitation, indicating fire, indicating that the valley is occupied by something that makes fire in the morning the way her settlement makes fire in the morning. The smoke is the most ordinary thing in the world. The smoke is the same smoke that rises from her own settlement's chimneys, produced by the same process, for the same purposes: warmth, cooking, the maintenance of the conditions in which a household continues. The chimneys are elven chimneys. The fire is elvish fire. Elfhild does not know precisely what this means, but she knows it means something. Because the quality of the morning air when the wind comes from the valley direction has a quality that the morning air from other directions does not have, and she has been noticing this for as long as she has been old enough to notice the quality of morning air, which is earlier than most people would expect. She eats the apple. She watches the smoke. The elf woman who walked past her an hour ago is somewhere in that valley now, or will be, or has been before and will return. The valley contains, at a distance that Elfhild can see but not cross, not yet, not at 7, not without permission or occasion, something that she has been told about in the way that children are told about things, partially, with the specific omissions that adults make when they are trying to protect a child from the weight of what they know, which is, the elves were there before anyone else, and they stayed, and no one goes to them, and they sometimes come to us. She finishes the apple. She looks at the smoke above the valley for a while longer. The length of time a child looks at something she wants to keep looking at before the morning's other demands reassemble themselves into requirements. Then she goes down the path. She will be back tomorrow morning, or the morning after, or some other morning when the high ground calls and she has an apple. She will be back for the next 70 years. In the specific way that people return to the places that formed them even when the forming is long complete. The smoke rises from the elvish chimneys. The valley holds its smoke and its valley quality of morning air and its roof lines against the mountains. Elfhild goes home. By FO 150, the borders of the former elvish realms are maintained by no one. This requires precision, because maintained by no one is not the same as unmaintained. The borders are maintained. They are maintained by the accumulated presence of the far inhabiting the territories they demarcate, by the specific environmental effect of immortal spirits in Phase 2 fading, which is not a military effect, not a wall, not a patrol in any sense that mortal border management would recognize. It is the effect of presence itself, the specific quality that a space acquires when something very old and very attentive has been inhabiting it for a very long time, which is the quality of a space that knows it is being inhabited, that reads as occupied to the bodies of creatures who enter it even when nothing in the space is visibly present to occupy it. The wardens of the eastern marches, Ringbearer among them, 150 years older than when he found the gray hair in his comb and finding, now that the gray has spread from one hair to a dozen but that the dozen do not seem to be multiplying, which may be the fading's pace slowing as it reaches a new equilibrium, or may be a temporary plateau before the next stage, and which he observes with the same patient professional attention he has brought to every anomaly in 3,000 years of border work, no longer walk the patrols they walked in the Third Age. They cannot walk them reliably. Phase 2 fading means the margins of their physical presence are inconsistent, footprints that are shallower than they should be, shadows that arrive slightly after the body produces them, the breath that does not always mist in cold air. The physical record of their passage through the forest is legible to a very good tracker as the record of something passing rather than the record of nothing. But it is not the record of a warden walking a defined route at a defined pace on a defined schedule, which is what the border patrols were. What remains instead is something that functions as a border without being one in any technical sense. A quality of the territory, accumulated over 3,000 years of elvish habitation, and now concentrated, by the fading's compression of spiritual presence into a smaller and smaller physical footprint, into the space the elves still occupy. The forest of what was Lothlórien in FO 150 is not warded, it is saturated. The The far of the elves remaining in it have been present in it for so long, and their presence has become, through the fading's progression, so much more a quality of the environment than a quality of individual persons moving through the environment, that the territory itself has acquired a character that affects the creatures entering it before those creatures have encountered any individual elf. Ferrand is a farmer. His father was a farmer before him and his grandfather before that, and the specific inheritance of the farming family is not land but knowledge, the accumulated, practical, embodied knowledge of what a specific piece of land does and does not do in the full range of conditions that the year produces, which is a knowledge that takes generations to build, and that is, by the Fourth Age's 2nd century, beginning to accumulate in the farming communities of the Anduin's banks into something that functions as the practical substrate of a civilization. The knowledge of where things grow and where they don't, of which soils hold water and which drain too fast, of what the year's weather patterns will likely be and how to position against the less likely patterns when they arrive. He has a wagon and 2 draft horses, a gray and a chestnut, both geldings, both large, both experienced in the specific. Practical education of draft horses that have been working the same farm routes for long enough to have developed their own opinions about those routes. They know the road from Farron's farm to the market at Anduin Crossing. They know the road from the farm to the mill. They know the road north to the timber-cutting areas where Farron sources the wood for his fences and his outbuildings. They know, in the specific, embodied, non-verbal way that horses know things, exactly what each road is and what it contains, and what they think of it. He is taking the timber road north in the late morning of a clear day in early autumn, FO 152. The road passes through several miles of ordinary woodland before it reaches the timber-cutting area, ordinary woodland, which is to say woodland that was forested before the settlements arrived and has been partly managed for the settlement's timber needs in the years since. The trees in it, the trees of ordinary northern Middle-earth in the Fourth Age, oak and ash and birch and the occasional beech, nothing unusual, nothing that a farmer's eye would read as requiring comment. And then, at a certain point on the road, the woodland becomes different. Not dramatically. Not in a way that Ferrand, on his first encounter with this specific point on this specific road, would have been able to articulate as a difference. He would have said, if asked, that the trees seem older here. He would have said the light is different. He would have said, with the specific tentative vocabulary of a practical man reaching for a description of something that exceeds his descriptive register, it feels like somewhere that has been here for a while. All of these descriptions are accurate. All of them are insufficient. What the point on the road marks is the edge of the former Lothlórien's southern extension, the boundary of the territory that the Sylvan Elves inhabited and still inhabit, in their Phase 2 fading, in their concentrated spiritual presence, in the environmental quality their continued existence produces in the space they continue to occupy. The trees here are older because they are. The light is different because the accumulated far in the surrounding forest alter the quality of the light the way a candle in a room alters the quality of the room, not by adding visible light, but by adding the warmth that light carries. Except here the light addition is the inverse of warmth. It is clarity, a specific, not quite explicable clarity of the shadows and the midtones and the way the tree trunks are distinguished from the space between them. It feels like somewhere that has been here for a while, because it has, in a sense that exceeds the physical age of the trees, which is the sense of a place that has been attended to, perceived, known, held in awareness, by extremely old and extremely attentive minds for an extremely long time. The oldest attention in Middle-earth is in this forest. Its effects are not supernatural. They are the ordinary effects of sustained, intelligent attention on the place that receives it, compressed now, by the fading, into something denser than it was when the attention was distributed across physical bodies walking through the space. The gray horse stops. Ferrand has not pulled the reins. He has not seen anything that would prompt him to stop. The road ahead is clear. No obstacle, no visual obstruction, no surface condition that would give the horse a reason to decline to proceed. The gray horse stops at the specific tree that marks the functional boundary of the territory and stands with the quality of stillness that draft horses produce when they have received information through the channels that horses receive information. Through the air pressure, through the ground vibration, through the specific sensory apparatus that 800,000 years of equine evolution has calibrated for the detection of exactly this kind of environmental signal, which is, something is here that my body does not have a file for. Ferrand tries the usual things. He encourages the gray with the clicking sound that the gray knows means proceed. The gray stands. He checks the gray's legs, its feet, its harness, the road surface in front of it. Everything is correct. The chestnut at the gray's shoulder is also still, not stopped in the same deliberate way, but aligned with the gray's stillness in the manner of a herd animal that has received the same signal through the same channels and is producing the same response. He gets down from the wagon. He leads the gray by the head, walking in front of it, presenting the posture that horses respond to as leadership, assertive, forward, the posture of a body that has information about what is ahead and has decided the information is acceptable. The gray follows him 3 steps. Stops, Farron walks forward. The lead rope tightens. He looks back at the gray. The gray is looking at the road ahead with the specific forward ear attention of an animal that has received a sensory input and is waiting for context that would allow it to classify it. The context does not arrive. The road ahead is the road ahead. There is nothing on it. He turns the wagon. Both horses move immediately, smoothly, with the uncomplicated efficiency of animals who have reached the destination that the return journey begins at, and are now engaged in the return journey, which is a thing they know how to do, which is a thing that their bodies find straightforward in the specific way that bodies find things straightforward when the direction is one they have already traveled and remember without confusion. He drives back toward the farm. He finds his timber through a different route, one that approaches the cutting areas from the east rather than the north. He does not investigate the point on the north road where the gray stopped. He does not send for anyone who might explain it. He is a farmer, and farmers in the Fourth Age's 2nd century have, through the specific, practical education of living adjacent to something they cannot fully explain, developed a working relationship with the inexplicable that is characterized not by curiosity or fear but by the pragmatic accommodation of a constraint. Something is in the northern forest. The horses won't go past a certain point. He routes around the point. This is the complete and sufficient response to the situation, and it takes him 3 more loads of timber to establish the correct routing, and after that, the routing is established and he does not think about the northern road very often. The horses at the forest edge in FO 152 are the most honest measurement available of what the fading elves have become to the world that surrounds them. A sensory fact registered by creatures who receive sensory facts without interpretation, without the mediating layer of cultural information that tells a person what they should be sensing, without the social information that tells them what to do once they have sensed it. The horses know something is there. They know their bodies do not have a file for it. They make the response available to bodies that do not have files for things. Stop, wait, decline to proceed. There is no malice in the stopping. There is no threat from the forest. The elves in the northern forest are not trying to stop the horses. They are trying to stay present in a world that is becoming, for them, increasingly effortful to be present in. And their effort produces, as its environmental effect, the specific concentration of spiritual attention that horses cannot cross without better information than they have. Farron's wagon is at the edge of the former Lothlórien forest on a clear autumn morning, turned around now, already moving south. The gray and the chestnut are walking with the smooth efficiency of horses whose direction has been clarified. The tree that marks the functional boundary stands in the morning light exactly as it has stood for 3,000 years. Roots in the soil that Nenya used to sustain and now sustains by the weight of the accumulated history of being this specific tree in this specific forest, which is a weight that does not require a ring to be real. The horses do not look back. Farron does not look back. The forest holds its boundary without a border, its attention without a body. Its 3,000 years of presence accumulated now into the silence and the air pressure and the quality of the light between the trunks, and the morning continues, and the horses walk, and the tree stands where it has always stood. The patrol enters the former Lothlórien on a morning in early summer, FO 280. There are 6 of them, the captain, 2 experienced rangers from the Anduin settlements who have been on this kind of frontier assessment before, a surveyor from the new administrative offices at Anduin Crossing who has been tasked with mapping the territory between the settlements and the old forest boundaries, and 2 younger men who are on this patrol, because experience in the field is how you become someone with experience in the field, which is the only method available and has always been. They are equipped for a week. Provisions, rope, survey equipment, and the specific combination of edged weapons and torches that the patrol briefing specified as appropriate for the territory, which is a combination that implies the patrol leadership has thought carefully about what the territory contains and has arrived at a pragmatic assessment of what is useful against it. They have been briefed. This is important and must be held. they are not uninformed. The captain, his name is Aldrich, a man of 43 with 20 years of frontier assessment behind him, has read the accounts available to him, which are the accounts of 2 decades of encounters along the former Lothlórien borders and the former Mirkwood margins and the northern forest edges. He has read the reports of cold and pressure and lights and the sense of being watched. He has read a report describing what a previous patrol encountered in Foe 242 in the southern margins of the forest, written in the specific, practical language of people who have been trained to describe what they observe rather than what they expect. He has discussed these accounts with the older rangers. He has formed a view. The view is, the territory is old and attended, and not hostile, and the attending is by something that cannot be seen or engaged in any conventional sense, and the thing to do is go in, do the survey, document what you find, and leave without doing anything that would characterize the patrol's presence as a threat. This is the correct view. It is the view of a man who has read the available evidence carefully and reasoned from it to the correct conclusion. He will execute it correctly. The execution will still produce the night lights. The morning entry is unremarkable. The forest at its margins looks like a forest at its margins, denser than the managed woodland they have been moving through. The canopy higher. The undergrowth fuller, the quality of the light between the trunks different in a way that the surveyor notes in his logbook as, light quality in forest interior differs from surrounding woodland, appears to scatter differently among the upper canopy than expected for tree type and density. This is accurate. He does not know why it is accurate. He writes it down because writing it down is his function, and he performs his function carefully. They move into the forest. The silence is the first thing that changes, not into a complete silence, not into the absence of the bird sound and the wind sound and the ambient woodland sounds that the forest should produce in early summer. The silence changes into a different kind of sound than those, which is the sound of a forest that is producing all of its ordinary sounds, and also something else that is not a sound, but is present in the same register as sounds. A quality of attention, received by the body as a slight increase in the awareness of the body. The specific sensation of being in a space that is aware of you. Aldrich reads this accurately. He does not mention it to the patrol because mentioning it would not help them do the survey and would potentially produce the response in the younger men that he is specifically trying to avoid, which is a response produced by information that the body has registered before the mind has processed it, and that the mind, catching up, has amplified with interpretive content that may or may not be accurate. He knows what the sensation is. He has been briefed. He says, keep moving, document what you see, stay together. They keep moving. The surveyor documents. His instruments produce correct readings, distances, elevations, the mapping data that the administrative offices need. The survey is proceeding correctly. The trees are trees, the ground is ground, the instruments are instruments. In the afternoon on the 3rd day of the survey, Galadriel becomes aware of them. This must be understood in Phase 3 terms. Phase 3 awareness is not the awareness of Phase 1, not the continuous, ambient, environmental awareness of a being who is fully embodied, and for whom awareness of her surroundings is the automatic function of functional senses. Phase 3 awareness is episodic. It requires attention, the specific, directed, effortful attention of a Fa that can no longer rely on a coherent Roa to receive information automatically, and must instead orient its own will toward the perception of specific things at specific times. Because the will is the only instrument still reliable. Galadriel's will is the most reliable instrument in Middle-earth. This does not change in Phase 3. The will is not diminished by the fading, it cannot be. Because the will is the Fa's own nature, the thing that the Fa is rather than the thing it has, and the Fa does not become less what it is through the loss of its body's coherence. What changes is the purchase of the will on the physical world, the interface, not the will itself. She can attend to anything she directs her attention toward. What she cannot do is attend to everything simultaneously, automatically, the way embodied perception attends to everything simultaneously, without effort. She directs her attention to the patrol. What she perceives, 6 mortal men, moving through the forest with a competence that she assesses as practical rather than ceremonial. Not pilgrims, not ceremony, not fear-driven, but the movement of people with a specific task to accomplish who are executing the task. The captain's posture is the posture of a man who is paying attention without alarming the men he is responsible for. This is a skill she recognizes. She has seen it in every age of the world. in the bearing of commanders who have learned that their own composure is a resource that their people consume and must therefore be managed. She turns her attention toward them with what she intends as warmth. This is the gap that 300 years of fading has not closed, the gap between intention and expression, between the warmth she possesses and the form it takes in the world at Phase 3. The warmth is real. She is Galadriel, and her love for the world and the beings in it is not a quality that 300 years of fading has diminished. Because love is not a property of the Roa that diminishes with the Roa. The love is present. The expression of it requires the mediation of a body, and the body is not reliably present, and what arrives in the space where the body would have been is the effect of the love rather than its expression. The effect is cold. The Fa's presence without the Roa's warmth produces a thermal differential in the space it occupies. The cold is real. It lowers the temperature of the air in the vicinity of her attempted manifestation by several degrees, which the patrol members register immediately, with the specific involuntary physical response of bodies that have detected a temperature drop that does not correspond to the time of day or the weather conditions. The captain looks at the air in front of him. He cannot see anything. He can feel the cold. He notes it in the internal register of a man processing sensory information as something is here. Temperature drop. Consistent with the briefing material, proceed with composure. He proceeds with composure. The shimmer comes at dusk. They have made camp on the third evening, inside the forest. At the surveyor's recommendation, because the surveyor needs 3 more hours of data in the morning before they can complete the eastern quadrant of the survey, and leaving tonight would require repeating the 2-day entry. Aldrich has agreed. They have a fire. The fire is warm and specific and entirely theirs, and it pushes back the dusk's specific quality of going dark in the forest, which in this forest in Phase 3 is a going dark that carries the concentrated presence of far that are becoming, in the failing light, slightly more visible than they are in the full day. Galadriel attempts to manifest. Not fully. Phase 3 cannot produce full manifestation for more than minutes, and the effort costs more than minutes are worth. She attempts a partial manifestation. The form, without the full coherence of the form, the shape of presence in the visible spectrum rather than the complete physical reality of presence. She is trying to be seen as what she is, which is, Galadriel, in the forest, not threatening, present, what the patrol sees, a shimmer of light between 2 mallorn trunks at the edge of the firelight's reach. Not white, not the warm white of firelight, not the cool white of moonlight. A shimmer that is its own color, which is the color of old silver seen in water, which is a color that does not have a name in Westron, because the things that produce it have not been common in Middle-earth for long enough to require a name for their color. Moving, not in the direction that wind would move light, which is not a direction wind moves anything, because light does not move in wind. Moving with the quality of something that is choosing where to be in the visible spectrum rather than being placed there by a physical source. 2 of the younger men take steps backward. This is involuntary. Not a decision to retreat, but the body's response to sensory information that exceeds the available context, which is the response that all bodies produce to exactly this category of input. Step away from the unknown stimulus, while the mind catches up. The 3rd younger man throws his torch at the shimmer. This is not aggression in any deliberate sense. It is the other response available to a body that has received sensory information it cannot classify. Engage the unknown stimulus with the available instrument, which is the torch, which is already in his hand, which has been in his hand since sunset, because Aldrich specified that torches stay lit. The torch leaves his hand before his mind has been consulted. It passes through the shimmer. It lands in a stand of dry undergrowth on the other side. The undergrowth catches. The fire that begins is small, a handful of square feet of dry material, early summer dry, catching with the specific efficiency of dry material in contact with an open flame. It is small enough that it would not be a crisis in ordinary circumstances. In these circumstances, with Galadriel's awareness suddenly and completely redirected from the patrol's perception to the fire's existence. Fire in Lothlórien. Fire that has not been permitted in the forest territory for 3,000 years of Nenya's management and her own subsequent attention. Fire in the one place in Middle-earth where fire is the thing she most directly and immediately cannot allow. The redirected attention does not produce equanimity. What it produces is extinguishment. She directs her will at the fire with the full force of her Phase 3 capacity, which is the full force of the will of Galadriel in Phase 3, which is not a small thing, which is an enormous thing applied at the specific, precise, Narrow focus of fire on dry undergrowth in a forest she has been tending by hand for 300 years. The fire goes out. Not tamped, extinguished. The specific total extinguishment that is the difference between having applied water and having applied will, which leaves not even the ember. The effort costs her 2 days. 2 days during which the maintenance of her own physical coherence, the basic, ongoing labor of keeping her fa in the kind of relationship with the world that allows her to move through it, to attend to the forest, to be present in any sense, falls behind the demands of the recovery, and she is less present in those 2 days than she was before the extinguishment. And less present means more fading, which means the 2 days are not simply lost but represent a net decrease in her relationship to the world's physical register. She absorbs this. She has been absorbing this kind of cost for 300 years. Aldrich's hand is on his sword. He has had his hand on his sword since the shimmer appeared. The hand is on the sword because the body put it there, and the body put it there because that is the position the body takes when the body is receiving sensory information that has not been fully classified, and the body is maintaining readiness. He has not drawn it. He is not going to draw it. The briefing was explicit. The swords passed through, the report said, and he believed the report. And the fire's extinguishment has provided additional evidence that what is in this forest does not require a drawn sword to be addressed and cannot be addressed by one. He lowers his hand from the hilt. He says, into the dark where the shimmer was, identify yourself. The forest is quiet. The fire is out. The evening has resumed its ordinary forest quality with the specific abruptness of an interrupted thing returning to its prior state. From the air, from the quality of the air in the space where the shimmer was, from the register that is not quite sound but arrives in the same location in the mind that sounds arrive in, one word: friend. He goes very still. He is a practical man and a careful one, and he has spent 20 years on frontiers, and he knows, from 20 years of frontier work, the difference between the will not of something that is hiding and the cannot of something that has encountered the boundary of its own capacity. He hears the cannot in what follows. I cannot, in the word that follows friend. In the response to his instruction to show yourself, and the quality of the I cannot is the quality of a limitation rather than a refusal, which is a meaningful distinction, which his body registers as the distinction between a situation that requires force and a situation that does not. He sheathes the sword that he has not drawn. He says, then we will go. He takes his patrol out of the forest. They go with the specific, organized efficiency of people who have received enough information to act on and are acting on it. In the morning he will write his report. The report will describe, in the practical language of someone who has been trained to describe what he observes, the shimmer, the cold, the fire extinguished, the voice. He will add one paragraph of assessment. The presence in the forest is not hostile. It is not visible. It is not communicating through conventional means. It is something else entirely. Recommend the following. Before he leaves, he finds a stake at the forest's edge. He carves into it in crude Westron with his belt knife, elf country. Not hostile. Cannot be seen. He drives it into the ground at the boundary tree. It is the most pragmatic description of Galadriel of the Noldor, born in Valinor, that has ever been produced. It is also, in its compression, more accurate than most. Mira of Gondor is 31 years old when she walks into Rivendell, and she has been preparing for the walk for 11 years. Not preparing in the logistical sense, though the logistics required preparation, and she has prepared them carefully. The letters of permission from the king's archive, the apprentices she selected for their combination of scholarship and endurance, the route through the northern territories that the settlement administrations have been mapping for 2 decades and that she studied until she could walk it from memory in the dark. The logistical preparation is complete and correct and is not what took 11 years. What took 11 years is the question of whether to go at all. She is a scholar of the Third Age, specifically, a scholar of the primary sources of the Third Age, which is to say she studies what the people who were present wrote about what they were present for, rather than what subsequent people wrote about what the present people wrote. This distinction matters enormously to her and is the source of much of her scholarly reputation and most of her scholarly conflict with colleagues who do not make the distinction. The primary sources of the Third Age are extraordinary. They are also finite. She has read everything available in the Gondorian archives, everything in the Rohirric records, everything that the trading communities of the northern settlements have contributed to the growing body of Fourth Age documentation. She has read the accounts of every encounter with the Elvish presences in the northern territories. She has read the stakes inscription and the patrol reports and Elfhild's community's accounts and everything else that touches the question of what is in the northern forests and the valley of the Bruinen. Everything she has read is a secondary account. It is an account of something encountered, perceived, registered, and described, which means it is an account of the encounter, not an account of the thing. She is a scholar of primary sources. The primary source of the Third Age is in Rivendell. The primary source of everything she has studied is a lord who was present at the Council of Elrond and the Last Alliance, and the founding of the Kingdom of Arnor, and the events of the Second Age that preceded all of it, who has been in the Valley of the Bruinen for 500 years without speaking to any scholar who came looking, and who has a library that no one has been in for 80 years. She goes. She enters Rivendell on a morning in late summer, FO 350. On foot, because the mule that was carrying the majority of her equipment broke a leg 3 days out and was left in the care of a settlement family with money for its maintenance, and a note about its disposition if she did not return in a month. She carries what she could carry: her notebooks, her writing materials, 2 weeks of provisions, the letters of permission. She is, by the time she reaches the valley's entrance, somewhat thinner than she was in Gondor, and considerably more experienced in the specific education that difficult terrain provides about the relationship between what you plan to carry and what you can carry. The valley's entrance is a narrowing between two ridges, a geological feature that the Third Age's accounts describe as the beginning of the enchanted approaches to Rivendell, the place where the hidden paths began, where the misdirection worked on those who came without guidance. In FO 350, there is no misdirection. The paths are plain. The valley is accessible. What remains of the Third Age's hidden quality is not operational magic, but the specific, accumulated character of a place that was hidden for a very long time and retains, in its topography and its microclimate and the quality of the light between the ridge walls, the phenomenological residue of having been the kind of place it was. It feels hidden, not because it is, because it was. She walks in. The house is clean. This is the first fact she registers, and it requires the full weight of her scholarly attention to register it accurately. The stone of the outer walls is clean in the way that stone is clean when someone has been cleaning it, not in the way that stone is clean when it is simply old and undisturbed. The distinction is visible to someone who has spent 11 years studying what stone in old buildings looks like after different periods of maintenance or neglect. This stone has been maintained. Recently, she estimates, from the lichen distribution and the dust accumulation in the corner of the main entrance arch within the last several weeks. She notes this. She does not speak. She has decided, in 11 years of preparation, that she will not speak first. She will enter, document, and wait. She enters. The library is 40,000 volumes. She estimates this within her first hour of moving through its rooms, which are organized with a logic she begins to decode in the second hour, not by subject, not by period, not by any of the organizational systems used in the Gondorian archives, by relationship, by the connections between texts, the conversations between documents, the way one text requires another, and is required by a third, so that the organization of the library is the organization of the knowledge contained in it, rather than a system imposed on the knowledge from outside. She has never encountered an organizational system like this. She has never encountered a library organized by its own internal logic, rather than by the logic of the people who maintain it. The maintenance of the books is beyond what she can account for. 40,000 volumes. Many of them documents from the First Age, documents that should be. By any understanding of organic materials' relationship to time, fragments, residues, dust, they are intact. Not merely preserved, intact, which is the state of things that have been continuously maintained at the level required to prevent the deterioration that time and humidity and the physical processes of organic decay would otherwise produce. 40,000 volumes, maintained for 500 years since the Three Rings lost their power, in the specific demanding condition of scholarly access rather than archival storage, which requires a different and more intensive form of maintenance. Someone has been maintaining them. She sits down at a reading table in one of the library's inner rooms on the second afternoon. A plain table with the best light in the room, positioned near the shelves she has spent the morning cataloging, with her notebook open and her pen in her hand, and the letter of permission on the table in front of her, addressed to Elrond of Rivendell, written by the king's archivist, correctly formal in the Sindarin that her teacher spent 6 years drilling into her in exactly the anticipation of this moment. The letter says, in the specific, carefully chosen language of someone who has thought about how to address a being who has been alive for 6,000 years, I am a scholar of Gondor. I have come to read your library, if you will permit it. I will take nothing. I will leave nothing. I will be present for 3 weeks, and then I will go. And I will tell no one the condition of the paths or the approaches if you prefer that I do not. I ask for nothing except 3 weeks in the presence of the primary sources. She places the letter on the table. She closes her hands in her lap. She waits. The weight arrives at the back of her neck. She has read about this. She has read Aldrich's patrol report and Elfhild's community accounts and a dozen others that describe the same specific sensation in the same specific location, the back of the neck, where the skull meets the spine, where the body's most sensitive early warning apparatus is concentrated. Not cold, not this time, not here. Not indoors in a room that someone has been maintaining with fires that she can feel the residue of in the warmth of the stone. The weight, the quality of attention that a space acquires when something very old is attending to it. She does not turn around. She knows there is nothing to turn around toward. She speaks into the room. In the Sindarin she has spent 6 years learning for this exact purpose. I am Mira of Gondor. I have come to read the library. She waits. She adds, in Westron, because the Sindarin is adequate but she wants to be certain, I will be 3 weeks. And then I will leave and tell no one where you are, if you prefer. The weight in the air shifts. She has spent 11 years preparing herself for this moment, and the preparation has not made it smaller. The weight's shift is the specific, unmistakable quality of a decision being registered in the space of a room, not a sound, not a visual phenomenon, not anything that her training has given her a word for, but something that arrives in the body before it arrives in the mind, and is understood by the body before the mind has processed it. The decision is yes. She stays 3 weeks. She works in the library every morning from first light until she can no longer see the text clearly. She works in the library every afternoon with the lamp she found in the entrance hall and that burns, when she lights it, with the specific clean efficiency of lamp oil maintained in good condition. She works in the library every evening until her hand is too tired to hold the pen. She fills 6 notebooks. She does not fill 6 notebooks with quotation. She is a scholar, not a copyist. She does not transcribe what is in front of her, but rather the record of her engagement with what is in front of her. The notes that will eventually become the work that will become the resource that subsequent scholars will have access to, because she was here, and they were not. The weight is always present, not obtrusively, not heavily, not demandingly. Present in the way that a candle is present in a room, because of what it contributes to the conditions in the room, rather than because of what it requires of you. She finds, after the first 3 days, that she no longer registers the weight as separate from the library itself, that the weight and the library have merged in her daily experience into the single fact of being in a place of extraordinary preservation where something has been doing the work of preservation, which is present, attending, maintaining, caring for what it has. On the final morning, she does not work. She sits at the reading table with her notebooks in her pack and her pen in her hand and a clean sheet of parchment in front of her, and she writes 3 words on it. She thinks about 3 weeks. She thinks about 40,000 volumes in a library maintained by something that cannot be seen, in a valley that has been attended to for 6,000 years by a mind she has spent 11 years studying the secondary accounts of. She thinks about what 3 weeks is to a being who has been tending this library for 5 centuries and was tending similar libraries for the 5 millennia before that. She thinks about what her notebooks contain, which is more than she could have produced in the entire remainder of her scholarly life, working with the available secondary sources. She writes, "Thank you. The library is magnificent." She folds the parchment once, she places it at the center of the table, she picks up her pack, she goes. That evening, Elrond reads the note. Phase 3 manifestation for the reading costs him what Phase 3 manifestation costs, the effort of full physical coherence for the duration of holding a piece of parchment, which is longer than it sounds when the coherence required to hold a piece of parchment is not automatic but volitional, not the body's ordinary grasp but the will's deliberate maintenance of the body's grasp capacity. He holds it, he reads it, he folds it again, the way it was folded when she left it. He sets it precisely at the center of the table. A table in the hall where the Council of Elrond once gathered on its outdoor terrace, though this particular table stands within, in the room that has held his correspondence and his private reading for 6,000 years of his possession of this valley. He sits in the chair he has always sat in. He is not fully visible in the evening light. He is Phase 3 visible, which is to say, there is something in the chair that the evening light does not account for entirely. A slight inconsistency in the shadows, a quality of the air in the chair's vicinity that is slightly warmer than the surrounding air, which is the warmth of a Fa that is working hard at presence. He looks at the note. The Gondorian handwriting is clear and careful, the handwriting of someone who writes for a living and has developed, through the practice of writing for a living, the specific clarity of someone who knows that their handwriting is an instrument and maintains it accordingly. 3 words. Thank you. The library is magnificent. He has known the library was magnificent. He has known this for 6,000 years, since the earliest volumes were acquired and the organization began, and the slow accumulation of human and Elvish and Maiar knowledge started to become what it is now. He knows this is in the possession of a knowing that is too old and too complete to produce what the 3 words produce: the sudden, total, unmistakable experience of the knowledge being received by someone else, of the thing you know being known by another person, of the work being witnessed. He does not weep. Phase 3 does not permit the physical expression of what weeping requires. He sits very still in the chair for the length of the evening, and the note is on the table in front of him. And the library is in the rooms around him, and the valley is outside the windows, and none of these things have changed since the morning. The note is new. He sets it down very carefully with the care of something placed in a position that will be maintained, not archived, not filed, not organized into the library's system. Set down at the center of the table. He does not move for the rest of the evening. The note says what it says. It will say it tomorrow, it will say it in 100 years, which is longer than the scholar who wrote it will live, which is longer than most things last, which is not very long, in the accounting of Rivendell's library, but is sufficient for the 3 words to have been written and left, which is what was needed, and is what was received. Elfhild of Bruinen Crossing is 77 years old, and she has been dying for 3 days in the way that people die when they are dying cleanly, not of illness, not of injury, not of anything that requires the word from after it, but of the completion of a mortal life that has used itself as fully as mortal lives can be used, which is fully. Which is the only way that her specific life was ever going to end, because she was not the kind of person who left things unfinished. Her healer's kit is on the table by the window. It has been on that table for 40 years, since she moved into this house after her husband died, and arranged the house around herself in the way that people who live alone arrange houses. Not for the accommodation of guests, but for the accommodation of work. The work positioned at the center, and everything else positioned around the work. The table by the window has the best light in the room from mid-morning to mid-afternoon, which is the light a healer's table needs, and the kit has been on it every morning for 40 years, with the specific worn in quality of something that has been in the same place long enough to have acquired belonging as a property, not merely placed there, but of there, part of the room's fact. The kit is old leather, supple with decades of handling, the brass fittings tarnished to the specific warm dark tarnish that brass achieves when it is handled regularly but not polished obsessively. Inside, the tools arranged in the order she has arranged them every morning for 40 years, which is the order her hands learned in the years when she was learning to be a healer, which is the order that has become through 40 years of daily practice, not an order she produces, but an order she finds. The way you find the path through your own house in the dark, not by looking, but by knowing. She cannot arrange the tools this morning. Her hands are not managing the fine work that arrangement requires. Her granddaughter Aldous arranged the kit this morning, because Aldous is a healer too, trained by Elfhild, the first student in the specific, informal, intergenerational transmission of the knowledge that Elfhild acquired in the shadow of the Elvish presence of the Bruinen Valley, which is a knowledge that has no formal name in Gondorian medical tradition, because it has no formal tradition in Gondorian medical tradition. Because it came into the 4th age through the specific medium of a 7-year-old who looked at an elf woman on a road in the early morning and spent the next 70 years following the implication of what she had seen. Aldous arranged the kit this morning. The arrangement is correct. It is not Elfhild's arrangement. The spacing between the probe and the splints is 2 finger widths instead of 3, and the small knife sits at an angle that Elfhild would have adjusted immediately, but adjusted gently. Because Aldous learned the kit from Elfhild, and the learning process required that Elfhild not override every deviation. because overriding every deviation produces a student who has learned the arrangement rather than a healer who has understood why the arrangement matters. The arrangement is Aldous' arrangement. It is correct. It is hers now. Elrond is in the room. He has made the effort, the considerable, specific effort of late Phase 3 coherence, to be physically present, not visible. Sustained visibility cannot be held for more than minutes at this stage, and the minutes are expensive in the accounting of physical coherence, and he will not spend them on visibility when presence is what is needed. He is present in the room above Elfhild's bed in the way that this stage of presence is present, as a quality of the air in a specific location, as a slight warmth that has no radiating source, as the weight at the back of the neck that Aldous registers and notes without turning toward it, because Aldous has been told by Elfhild that the weight means Elrond. And the weight has been in this valley for as long as Aldous has been old enough to feel it, and feeling it is not the same as understanding it, but it is sufficient for Aldous to know what it means. He has known Elfhild since she was 7. This is the weight of this particular evening, and it must be held in its full specificity, not 7 decades of supervision, not 7 decades of the distant benevolent observation of something vast attending to something small, 7 decades of knowing a specific person, knowing the way she moved through her knowledge, the way her mind worked at a problem, the way she held grief and what she did with it afterward, the way she laughed, which was infrequent and therefore specific, the particular quality of attention she brought to suffering, which was the quality of someone who had been in proximity to suffering's antithesis for long enough to understand what suffering was missing. He watched her become what she became. He watched the 7-year-old who looked at the healer on the road and found, in that looking, the direction she would spend 70 years moving in. He watched the girl become the apprentice, and the apprentice become the healer, and the healer become the teacher, and the teacher become the resource, and the resource become the person that the northern settlements brought their impossibilities to, because Elfhild had been too close to something impossibly old for too long to find anything merely difficult. He has never spoken to her directly. In 70 years of her life, he has never been in a physical condition that permitted the kind of direct communication that 7-year-olds on roads deserve. Because the 7-year-old on the road happened when Phase 1 was giving way to Phase 2, and the cost of direct manifestation was already high enough that he assessed it against the potential benefit, and declined. And by the time he reconsidered the assessment, she was 16, and the road meeting was 9 years gone, and the moment had its own geometry that he did not have the right to impose on by appearing in it after the fact. He has been present. He has tended the valley in which she lived. He has maintained the quality of the air and the quality of the water and the specific, accumulated. Spiritual presence quality of the Bruinen Valley that produced, in everyone who grew up in it, the specific receptivity to the Elvish knowing that Elfhild had more of than anyone else in the settlement's history, because she was the one who looked first and longest and without the adult interpretation that converts the unfamiliar into something manageable. He has been the valley. And she has been in the valley. This is the whole of what they have had, and it has been sufficient for her to become what she became, and it has been in its way everything. Elfhild's breathing changes at the 2nd hour after midnight. Aldous registers it immediately, because she is a healer, and she has been sitting with this breathing for 3 days, and she knows its pattern the way she knows the arrangement of the kit, and the change in the pattern is legible to her before it is legible to anything else in the room. She does not reach for the kit. There is nothing in the kit for this. She takes Elfhild's hand instead, which is the correct response to the change in breathing, because the correct response is presence rather than intervention, which is a distinction that takes a very good healer a long time to learn, and that Elfhild taught Aldous in the 2nd year of Aldous' apprenticeship in a conversation that Aldous has not forgotten and will not forget. Elfhild's son is at the door. He has been at the door for 3 days in the way that family members stand at the doors of rooms where people are dying, present, unable to be useful, present anyway. Because presence is the only thing available, and absence is not an option even when presence is insufficient. He is 39 years old and his mother is dying, and he is at the door, and this is correct, and it is the most painful form of correct that existence produces. Elfhild's daughter-in-law has brought water, which is also correct and unable to help, in the way that most correct things are unable to help at the moment they are most needed, which is not an argument against their correctness, but is an accurate description of their limitation. Elfhild breathes. Her eyes are open. They have been open for most of the last day, in the way that eyes are open in the last hours, not focused on the room's contents, not tracking the faces above her, but open in the sense of not closed, in the way that a window is open when it has been left, rather than in the way a window is open when someone has opened it for the purpose of what windows are for. The eyes are open, and they are not seeing what Aldous and the son and the daughter-in-law are, and what they are seeing is not available for description. Elrond attends to her completely. He does this with the full weight of what attending completely means at this stage, the entire orientation of his will toward this specific person in this specific moment, the full compression of his awareness onto the specific fact of Elfhild dying at 77 in this room in the house in Bruinen Crossing, on the eastern bank of the river that runs through the valley he has inhabited for 6,000 years. He does not attend to the library. He does not attend to the trees. He does not attend to the weight at the back of Aldous' neck, or the sun at the door, or the quality of the night air outside the window. He attends to her. What he is attending to, the specific quality of a mortal life reaching its completion, which is a quality he has been present for across the entirety of the Third Age and the Fourth, has been present for every significant death in the history of the world that he was near enough to attend, beginning with his brother Elros, who chose mortality at the dawn of the Second Age, and whom Elrond sat beside as mortality reached its conclusion for the first time in a life he had shared from its beginning. He knows this quality. He knows it the way he knows the quality of the library's oldest volumes, through the total familiarity of having attended to it so completely and so many times that the attending is no longer an act performed, but a state inhabited. He attends to her, and then, at the third hour after midnight, she crosses the threshold. This requires the specific language available to it, which is the threshold, not a metaphor and not a religious statement and not a description of what death is. Because what death is exceeds description in every cosmology, and Tolkien's cosmology is not an exception. The threshold is the word that the Fourth Age and the Third Age before it and every age before that has used for the specific event of a mortal person's passing from the world of the living to whatever follows it, and the word is chosen because it is the word for the boundary between two conditions, and does not specify what lies on either side. And not specifying is the honest condition of any mortal or immortal intelligence describing what they have not experienced. Elfhild crosses it. This is what happens. Her breathing stops and she is gone, and the room has the quality that rooms have when the thing that made them significant in a specific moment is no longer in them. And Aldous holds the hand that is no longer responding to being held, and the son at the door understands before he is told. And the night continues in the indifferent way of nights that do not know what has happened in the rooms they are outside of. Elrond is at the threshold. He has always been at the threshold. This is the precise description of his entire existence, the threshold between worlds, between the mortal and the immortal, between men and elves, between the world that is given to men and the world that was given to elves before it, between the thing that ends and the thing that doesn't. He was made at the threshold. His mother was Elwing, of Elvish and Mannish descent. His father was Arundel, who was half-elven, who sailed to Valinor and was permitted to stay, because the world could not contain what he had done in reaching it. Elrond was born of the union of things that should not have been united, which produced a being who was built to stand at the place where those things meet. He has healed the dying, thousands of them, across 6,000 years of the world's history, bringing them back from the edge of the threshold when the healing required it. He has counseled the living about the threshold, told them what could be said about it, which is not very much, in the specific honest register of someone who knows everything available to be known about it and knows that everything available to be known is very little. He has been the threshold's keeper, not its gatekeeper, not its guardian in any prohibitive sense, but its tended presence, the lord of the valley through which the world's history passed and continues to pass. He cannot cross it. This is the complete fact of his situation at the third hour after midnight in FO 110, in a house in Bruinen Crossing on the eastern bank of the Bruinen. Elfhild has crossed the threshold that is the threshold of all thresholds, the only threshold that matters in the long accounting of a life, and Elrond is standing at the threshold that he has always stood at and cannot cross it. Because the threshold she has crossed is the one built specifically, deliberately, as Tolkien understood the gift of Ilúvatar to men. For the people for whom death is the gift rather than the loss. For the people who were built to leave the world rather than to remain in it. He was always the door. Now he cannot open it. The healer's kit is on the table by the window. Aldous will take it in the morning. She will carry it to her own house on the northern road, to the table by her window that already has the tools she has accumulated in her own practice, and she will integrate what is useful and set aside what duplicates what she already has. She will keep the probe, because the probe is better than her probe, older, more worn, with the specific responsiveness of an instrument calibrated by decades of one hand's use. She will keep the small knife, because there is nothing wrong with the small knife, and an additional small knife has uses that a healer in the northern settlements is never without. The arrangement inside the kit will change. It will become Aldis's arrangement. And Aldis's arrangement will not be Elfhild's arrangement, and Elfhild's arrangement will not be the arrangement of whoever taught Elfhild, because the arrangement a healer uses is the arrangement that her hands produce after long use, which is the arrangement that is specific to her hands, which is not transferable. The kit will be in service tomorrow. Aldis has 3 patients in the morning and 1 difficult case in the afternoon, and will use the probe for the difficult case, and the probe will perform exactly as it was built to perform, which is the only standard it was ever built to, and the only standard Elfhild maintained her equipment to. The kit is the satisfaction beat, not because it is symbolic, but because it is complete. It is a healer's kit in full, working order, on a table in a room that contained a life that has concluded, belonging now to the next person whose hands will calibrate it to themselves. It does not grieve. It does not know that the hands that arranged it for 40 years are no longer present. It is exactly what it is, which is the material record of a competence that does not die with the person who possessed it, because competence, transmitted, becomes the property of the person it was transmitted to, and Elfhild's competence is in Aldis's hands, and Aldis's hands are correct. This is the only immortality available in the age of men, the thing you give to the person who comes after you, who gives it to the person who comes after them, who does the same, which is not the immortality of the elves, and is not the immortality of the Valar, and is not the immortality of the divine. It is sufficient. It is, in the accounting of the Fourth Age, the only thing that is. The tavern in Carindom is called the River's Edge, which is accurate in the way that most tavern names in Fourth Age settlements are accurate. It sits on the river's edge, which is why it was built where it was built, which is why it has customers who work on the river and adjacent to the river, and who have the specific thirst that work in cold, damp air produces. And the name is a description rather than an aspiration. Carindom itself is not large. It has developed in the 2 centuries since its founding from the provisional settlement it was in Fo 260, 12 buildings, 2 wells, a palisade that the founders built from habit rather than necessity, and that was dismantled in Fo 280 when it became clear that the threat it was built against was not coming. Into the small, permanent, organically shaped community that settlements become when they survive long enough to accumulate the specific gravity of an established place, a mill, a market twice a week, a granary that serves the surrounding farms, a healer's house since FO 310, when the current healer's grandmother moved here from the southern settlements and never left. The River's Edge has been serving ale since FO 275. The current building is the 3rd structure on the site, the first having been replaced after a fire in FO 301, and the second having been replaced when the 3rd was simply better built and larger, and the second was repurposed as a granary annex, which is not a dignified ending for a tavern building, but is an honest one. It is mid-afternoon in FO 462. The tavern is half empty, which is the normal population of the River's Edge at mid-afternoon, which is the hour between the river workers' morning and the river workers' evening, when the people who have the kind of work that ends at a specific time have not yet ended it, and the people who have the kind of work that ends when it is done are either still doing it or have not yet developed the specific thirst that will bring them here when they are done. The child's name is Bessa. She is 9 years old. She has been sent by her father to collect a pot that he left at the river's edge 2 evenings ago when he was called away from his evening ale by a neighbor's barn fire and carried the news of the fire home in his head and the pot not at all. And the pot is a good pot, and he needs it back. Bessa has been given very clear instructions about the pot, and very clear instructions about not staying at the river's edge longer than necessary to collect the pot, which are the instructions of a father who knows his daughter and has calibrated his instructions accordingly. She goes to the river's edge and asks the tavern keeper for the pot, and the tavern keeper goes into the back to find it, and Bessa sits at the table nearest the door, because the nearest table is the nearest table, and she has nothing to do but wait. She has a crust of bread. The crust is the tail end of the loaf from lunch. Carried in her pocket, because she did not finish it at lunch, and she is 9 years old, and her body's relationship to food at 9 is the relationship of something still growing, which is always available, always acceptable, never turned away. She takes it from her pocket. She is not particularly hungry. She tears it into small pieces on the table. Not because she intends to eat the pieces systematically, but because tearing bread is an occupation available to hands that need an occupation while waiting for a tavern keeper who is taking longer than expected. The table is clean wood, worn smooth by the decades of use that tavern tables accumulate. The pieces of bread on it are ordinary bread pieces. The specific gray-brown of the settlement's standard loaf, which is made from the settlement's standard grain, which is the grain this particular corner of the former Brownlands produces in the specific combination of soil and rainfall and 400 years of improved agricultural practice. She looks up. The flicker is in the corner. She sees it immediately, because 9 years old is the age at which peripheral vision is at its most precise, and the social instruction to not look at things that are not there has not yet been fully installed by the adult world that produces that instruction. She looks at it directly, which is not what adults do. Adults do not look directly at the flicker, because adults have been taught, through the accumulated adult social transmission of information about the flicker, that looking directly at the flicker does not produce useful results. That the flicker is not in the register of visible things in the way that visible things are expected to be visible, that looking at it directly will make it less rather than more visible, which is accurate. Bessa looks directly at it. The flicker, looked at directly, is not more visible. It is, as the accumulated adult transmission accurately describes, less visible when attended to directly than when perceived peripherally. But less visible when attended to directly is still visible, which is more visible than the adults in Carindam typically give it credit for. Because the adults in Carindam have spent their lives learning not to look directly at the flicker, and have therefore not developed the specific observation skill of attending to something that is less visible when directly attended to, which is a skill that requires practice, and that Bessa has not yet been discouraged from practicing. The flicker is in the corner where the window is. The window is the west-facing window of the river's edge, which is not the window with the best light. The best light in the river's edge comes from the south-facing window on the opposite wall, which is why the south-facing tables are the ones the regular customers prefer, and the west-facing corner is the one that collects the cold draft in winter and the late afternoon shadow in summer and is generally occupied only when the better seats are taken. The west-facing corner is the corner that looks, when you sit in it, toward the Bruinen Valley. It has always been the west-facing corner. The flicker has been in it for longer than the river's edge has been the river's edge. Bessa throws a piece of bread at it. This is not aggression. This is not fear. This is the specific, uncomplicated empiricism of 9 years old encountering a phenomenon and applying the available test. She has a piece of bread in her hand, and there is a thing in the corner and the question her mind produces. Without the adult social filtration that would produce instead the question, is it appropriate to throw bread at that? Is what happens if I throw bread at that? She throws the bread. The bread passes through the flicker. She watches it pass through. She watches it hit the wall of the river's edge behind the corner with the specific small sound of bread hitting a wall, which is not a significant sound. The bread lies on the floor at the base of the wall. The flicker is where the flicker was. She considers the result of her experiment. The result is, the bread passes through. The flicker does not react. The flicker does not disappear, does not brighten, does not move toward or away from the bread. It continues to flicker in the way it was flickering before the bread was thrown at it, which is, slightly, consistently, with the quality of a candle in a draft, except that there is no candle and no draft. She eats the rest of the bread. She watches the flicker while she eats. The flicker does not stop. She finishes the bread. The flicker is still there. She looks at it for a while longer, the length of time a 9-year-old looks at something when the thing has been found to be consistently itself and the looking has moved from investigation to the specific. Slightly different kind of looking that is closer to company than examination. The flicker is a lord of the Noldor. This requires saying in its full specificity, because the chapter holds the gap between this fact and its expression throughout, and the gap must be felt rather than explained. The flicker is someone who is born of a union of elves and men in the First Age, and who has heard, across 6,000 years, the accounts of the two trees from those who saw them, which is not the same as having seen them himself, but is a closer inheritance of that light than the world otherwise carries. The flicker is someone who fought in the wars of the First Age's ending, and who was present when the world was changed at the First Age's end. who watched the ocean close over Beleriand, and understood in the watching that the world's closing of itself over a loss was not the end of the loss, but the world's way of saying, this is how large the loss was. The flicker is someone who has been maintaining the physical conditions in which a specific river valley remains a suitable place for habitation for 6,000 years, who has been maintaining the library for 500 years since the Three Rings lost their power, who read a piece of parchment with 3 words on it 112 years ago, and is still, in the accounting of 500 years of advanced fading, registering what those 3 words cost the person who wrote them to leave. In the west-facing corner of the River's Edge Tavern in Carindom on a mid-afternoon in FO 462, the flicker is Elrond, or what remains of Elrond in the physical world, which is the Fa of Elrond, maintaining itself at the furthest stage it has yet reached, which is to say, present, aware, conscious, thinking, attending, perceiving the room and the child and the bread and the tavern keeper moving around in the back, and the quality of the afternoon light through the west-facing window, and the quality of the Bruinen Valley as it exists in FO 462, which is different from the quality of the Bruinen Valley in FO 350 when Mira was here, which is different from how it was when Elfhild was here, which is different from how it was into 3021 when the White Ship was covered, which is different from every previous version of itself across the 6,000 years of Elrond's habitation of it, which is the nature of the world, which has always been the nature of the world, which is something he has known for 6,000 years, and known with the part of him that knows things because the world has demonstrated them consistently rather than the part that receives them as instruction. The world changes. He has always known this. He chose on September 29 of Third Age 3021, or stood still while the choice was made in the space between himself and the gangplank, to remain in a world that changes, to be the thing in the changing world that does not change, which is what the fading is, which is the specific cost of remaining in a world whose nature is the nature he does not share. A piece of bread passes through him. It hits the wall, it lies on the floor. He registers the bread. The tavern keeper comes back with the pot. He sets it on the table in front of Bessa and says, "Your father's?" And Bessa says, "Yes, thank you," and picks it up and gets down from the table. She looks at the corner. The flicker is there. She looks at the tavern keeper. The tavern keeper is moving toward the bar, toward the things that require his attention, away from the table. He does not look at the corner, because looking at the corner is not something you do, in Carindom, after a certain age. Bessa looks at the corner one more time. The flicker does not change. She goes. The pot under her arm, the road back to her father's house ahead of her. The mid-afternoon of FO 462 doing what mid-afternoons do, which is move toward the evening without requiring anything of the people passing through it. The piece of bread lies on the floor at the base of the west-facing wall. It is ordinary bread, the specific gray-brown of the settlement's standard loaf, one small irregular piece, the product of a 9-year-old's absent handling of the tail end of her lunch. It has not been touched by anything that would distinguish it from any other piece of bread on any tavern floor in the Fourth Age. It is simply bread on a floor, which is a common enough category of object in the world that the tavern keeper sweeps it up that evening without noticing it, which is the correct response to bread on a tavern floor, which is, sweep it, dispose of it, continue. What it passed through, in the course of its brief and uneventful flight from a 9-year-old's hand to the base of the west-facing wall, was the concentrated spiritual presence of the most experienced healer and counselor and lord of the Third Age who remains in Middle-earth, in the corner of a tavern in a small settlement on the eastern bank of the Bruinen. The bread did not know this. The bread cannot know this, because bread is bread, which is all it is required to be, which is all it has ever been, which is sufficient. The bread passed through. The flicker continued. In the morning, the corner of the river's edge will be as it is every morning. The west-facing corner, the one with the draught in winter and the shadow in summer, the one with the window that looks toward the valley. The flicker will be in it. It has always been in it. The customers who prefer the south-facing tables will take the south-facing tables. The west-facing corner will be the last to fill, as it has always been, and the last to empty, as it has always been. And the flicker will be there when the last customer leaves, and the tavern keeper extinguishes the lamps. It was there before the river's edge was the river's edge. It was there when the river's edge was the second building, and when it was the first building. It was there when the settlement was 12 buildings with a palisade. It was there when the valley had no settlement in it at all, only the river and the quality of the valley air that the valley has because of what has been attending to it for 6,000 years. It will be there tomorrow. The field is ordinary. This is the first and most important fact about it, and it must be held from the beginning and not released. The field is ordinary. It is good farmland. The soil in the western margins of what was, 500 years ago, Lothlórien is good soil, enriched by 5 centuries of Elvish presence in the specific, non-dramatic way that long presence enriches things, not through any deliberate act, but through the accumulated deposit of attention and care, and the biological processes of a living forest maintained by living minds. Across a duration sufficient to alter, permanently and beneficially, the chemistry of the earth below it. The farmers who work this land know it is good land. They do not know why it is better than the farmland 2 miles south or 3 miles east. They know what good land does, which is, it produces more than the land around it, with less coaxing, in more conditions. And the farmers of this part of what was once the Golden Wood have been producing more than their neighbors, and have stopped asking why. The field is plowed in its winter furrows at this time of year. October, 500 years since the white ship was covered with sailcloth in the harbour of Mithlond, 500 years since Galadriel put her hand on the cold railing and looked at the light on the water of the Lune and did not board. At the field's centre, a maple tree, not a malarn, not anything elvish, not anything planted or intended or symbolic. A common maple, the species that seeds itself into cleared ground with the cheerful opportunism of trees that have evolved to take advantage of exactly the kind of disruption that land clearing produces. It seeded itself here when the land was being cleared for farming, 40 years before the current farmer's father's father broke the first furrows, and it was too well placed to remove. Centered in the field, where its shade in summer and its windbreak in winter and its root system's contribution to the field's water retention all argue for its presence more convincingly than its removal could be argued against. It has been here for 60 years. It is a mature, healthy, entirely ordinary maple. Galadriel has been tending it for 30 of those 60 years. She is in the furthest stage of fading she has yet reached. The morning light of October in the former Lothlórien passes through her. Not around her, not past her in the way that light passes objects it cannot penetrate, through her, in the way that light passes through glass, except that glass refracts and colors what passes through it, and she does not. The light that strikes the field at the low angle of an October morning at this latitude strikes her and continues without refraction, without color, without the shadow that a body of her size would cast on the frost-pale grass behind her. She is there, and the light is there, and both are present, and one passes through the other as though the other is not. She maintains a form. This is the correct language for it, she maintains. It is not automatic. It has not been automatic for a long time. She holds the shape of herself in the visible world through the specific continuous exertion of the will that is the only instrument this stage has left, and the holding is effortful and the effort does not stop, ever, because this stage does not have intervals of non-effort. The will is always working. The form is always maintained. And what the form looks like, in the October morning light passing through it, is mist. This is not metaphor. It is the accurate optical description of what a fa at this stage, maintaining a physical form, looks like when the morning sun is at the angle it is at, which is low, which is the angle that makes mist visible when it is there, and makes it glow slightly at its edges and does not make it solid, does not give it shadow, does not give it the full complement of physical properties that make a thing present in the sense that a body is present. She is mist. She is Galadriel in the form that 500 years of fading has arrived at, which is present, attending, willing, aware, and not quite there in the way that solid things are there. Her hands are almost transparent in the morning light. She tends the maple. The maple does not know she is there. This is the image the chapter holds, and it must be held exactly. The maple does not know she is there. The maple is a tree. Trees do not know things in the way that the elves know things, or in the way that men know things, or even in the way that the world itself knows things in Tolkien's theology, which is the way of matter that has been made conscious by the music, and retains something of that consciousness in its existence. The maple was not planted by the music. It seeded itself in a cleared field 60 years ago and has been growing according to the conditions available to it, which are good conditions, which produce in it the specific, vigorous growth of a well-placed tree in well-amended soil in a climate it is suited to. It does not grow faster for her attention. It does not grow taller. It does not flower out of season or produce an abundance that exceeds what the conditions explain. Her presence at this stage is not sufficient for these effects. Those were Third Age effects, Nenya effects. The effects of a power that operated through a ring and a body and a will working in concert, and none of these three instruments are what they were. What remains is the will alone, and the will alone can maintain her form and attend to the tree and love the tree with the complete, undiminished quality of love that Galadriel has always brought to the things she loves, which is everything, which has always been everything. The tree receives none of this except what it would receive from the morning being the morning and the soil being what the soil is, which is very good soil, which is all the maple requires. She tends it anyway. She has been tending it for 30 years, and she will tend it for as long as she can maintain her coherence in the presence of the world, which is not a duration she has calculated, because calculating it would require the acceptance of the calculation's conclusion, which she has not yet made, and which she is not certain she will make. This stage is a condition, not a sentence. She does not know where it ends. She knows that every stage before it ended in the next stage. She knows that beyond this stage lies the thing that Tolkien's cosmology describes as the Faz lingering, the haunting, the specific and irrevocable undeath of a spirit that cannot reach Mandos and cannot be in the world and cannot leave. She knows this is coming. She has known this since FO1, when the ship's canvas went on, when she turned back into the world that was supposed to be done with her. She tends the maple. In the October morning field, with the furrows of the winter prepared ground running east-west around the tree's root zone and the frost on the grass catching the low sun at the specific angle that frost catches low sun, which is the angle that makes frost look like it is lit from within, in this field. At this hour, 500 years after the decision that was not quite made on a gangplank in Mithlond Harbor, the maple's leaves are going gold. It is October. The leaves go gold in October, because that is what maple leaves do in October, which is what they have done in October for as long as there have been maple trees in October, which is longer than Galadriel has been in Middle-earth. And she has been in Middle-earth for a very long time. The gold is the specific gold of common maple in its autumn program, not the gold of the Melern, not the gold of Lothlórien under Nenya, not the gold of any Elvish thing. The gold of a tree doing what it does in the season it does it, without assistance, without preservation, without the intervention of anything except the world being the world. She watches it. There is no Nenya on her finger. There is no mirror in a garden. There is no fellowship to receive, no one ring to refuse, no Sauron to resist, no wisdom to dispense to a world that is waiting for it, no counsel to give that the world cannot now find within itself. Because the world has been finding itself for 500 years without the counsel that she was, in another age, the source of. There is no ceremony and no audience and no significance available in this field on this morning, except the significance of a maple tree going gold in October, while something that was once the most powerful elf in Middle-earth tends it with hands that the morning light passes through. She watches the gold. The gold does not know it is being watched. The tree does not know it is being tended. The morning does not know what it is illuminating. The morning has always been indifferent to what it illuminates, has always struck the world and continued. The light going through whatever it goes through, and past whatever it passes and striking whatever it strikes, without knowledge of the difference between them. She has known this for 6,000 years. She has known it the way you know something that the world has demonstrated so consistently and across so long a duration that the knowing has become the structure of the experience rather than a conclusion drawn from it. The morning does not know. The world does not know. The light passes through and does not ask what it is passing through. She has always known this and found it beautiful. She finds it beautiful now. The morning light comes through the October field and through her hands and through the form she is maintaining by will alone, and hits the maple, and the maple's leaves catch it and hold it for the fraction of a second that a leaf holds light before reflecting it outward in the specific gold of a common maple in its season. The gold is very bright. The morning is very cold. The field runs east and west in its winter furrows. The tree is exactly what it is. She made this world. Not this field, not this maple, but the quality of this morning is continuous with the quality of every morning she has tended since the ship was covered, and the world is in better condition for the tending than it would have been without it. And the maple is in better condition for 30 years of her attention than it would have been in a field with worse soil. She does not know if this is enough. She has chosen not to know. Choosing not to know the answer to whether it is enough is the last form of freedom available to her at this stage, and she holds it the way she holds everything she loves, with the full weight of a will that has not learned to release. in a world that has been asking her to release for 500 years, while the morning light passes through her hands, and the maple's leaves go gold, and the Octoberfield does what Octoberfields do, which is continue, which is persist, which is exist with or without her, exactly as the world was always going to do, and always will. This is what remaining costs, not death, not darkness, not the dramatic ruin of power overreached, morning light passing through, and the will to stand in it anyway.